John arrives home early only to catch Susie dressed for a date with Jack, his best friend. The betrayal explodes in a storm of accusations, shattering their marriage. At a nightclub, Jack pulls Susie into a dangerous dance, sparking a forbidden affair. Secrets unravel as John confronts Jack at work, turning friends into enemies. Now Susie is left alone, facing the devastating aftermath of her choices in a lifeless apartment. The calm before the storm is over. Nothing will ever be the same. I was finally going to be happy again. It was about time. My husband, John, came home early from work today. Early? This was the first time ever. He always put his job before me. I was almost done getting ready for my date tonight. Yes, an actual date with a kind man. It wasn't just a night out with my friends like John thought. He walked in with a bad attitude, grabbed me by the arms, and yelled, "Who are you seeing tonight and where?" I was tired of his bullying. I looked him in the eye and spoke up. "I'm having dinner with Jack Carter tonight, and there might be more." I didn't mean anything bad, but I wanted to feel appreciated. I remembered how I once felt when I met nice guys in college. I just wanted to feel happy and alive again. It got to John. He let go of me and said, "My wife has lost her mind." That upset me even more. I felt a rage I hadn't felt in a long time, and I started shouting back. Then he said something like, "Charlie was right all along. That awful man, that pathetic nobody." I didn't take it anymore. I called 911 for help and also called Jack to come support me. Finally, a patrol car arrived, but 2 of John's friends came too. Where was Jack? He was the one I really wanted by my side. Then my mom and my sister Janice showed up, and John finally left. I cried in their arms as they comforted me. Maybe my unhappy marriage was really ending, and I had a chance for some joy. But watching John walk out that door still hurt. It was hard to let go of the sadness I had felt for months. Thoughts were racing through John's mind. What was happening? Brandon, my right-hand man, quietly asked me to join him for coffee in our small break room. He looked worried and said, "What's going on with Jack?" Jack Carter was my oldest friend on the team, and he was working hard to become a sergeant in the St. Louis County Tactical Operations Unit. He wanted my job, and I hoped he could have it once I moved up. "What do you mean?" I asked. "He's saying some harsh things about you and Susan." "Susie? My Susie?" "He's hinting that he has a close relationship with her and that he will stand up to you for how you've treated her all these years." I was shocked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All I could think was, what is going on? Brandon continued, "Half the guys in the unit believe him. Only a few of us know you, your family, and how things really are. It just didn't seem possible. I'm worried that personal issues in our unit could lead to trouble. It's a serious concern. We all carry guns, and one officer is getting too close to another officer's wife. Even if nothing is happening, this could create real problems for us in any situation we face. It could even lead to a wild showdown. I needed to figure out how to address this, but should I talk to Jack or Susie first? Was Jack trying to win over Susie? She had clearly turned him down. Now he seemed to be acting out in a show of false bravado. I've known Jack since our days in the Army, and he could be a bit of a jerk, especially around women. But for the most part, he was reliable. I never doubted he'd have my back when things got tough. I spent a lot of time with him drinking after his wife left him. She was struggling with the stress of his job and frequent absences, and it hurt her to see him give in to temptations that came with being in uniform. Connie found out about Jack's issues, and on 2 occasions, she took their kids and went back to Chicago. That was hard on Jack in many ways. My own marriage with Susie hasn't been easy either. I often wonder why she chose to be with me. We all went to the same junior high school, but she was 2 years younger than me and her brother Charlie. Charlie was my best friend, even though we came from different backgrounds. My family was working class, just getting by. The Scranton family was better off, not wealthy, but they enjoyed their status. They often showed it, especially Susie's parents. But Charlie wasn't like that. We both played the same sports, baseball, basketball, and football. We both earned letters in all 3 sports. By our junior years, we were both starters on the baseball and football teams. He was the flashy one, while I was more down to earth. We were still very close, both on and off the field. Charlie was the smarter one, and with his family's support, he was definitely going to college. I planned to join the Army for education benefits after serving. In high school, I spent a lot of time at Charlie's house, but it was clear that Susie didn't really like me at all. Plus, she looked down on my situation in life. In high school, it was the same. She hung out with a different group of rich kids, even as a sophomore. This was the group that Charlie should have known, but he really didn't care about them. I just had an average date to my senior prom while Charlie went with his special girlfriend, Susie. She arrived with a typical rich guy who acted like a jerk. Like I expected, after high school, Charlie went to Notre Dame and I went to Fort Benning in Columbus, Georgia for basic combat training. I eventually became a military police officer and did some extra training. I served 2 tours in Iraq. It was interesting work, but not a lot of fun, and I made it through. 4 years later, I returned to St. Louis and got on a waiting list to possibly join the St. Louis City or county police departments. I was also taking classes at junior college to earn some credits in criminology. It seemed a bit silly to me compared to what I learned in the Army, but I had to keep trying. Charlie and I kept in touch through letters and emails. He was coming home for the summer before starting law school. We finally met one night at our old neighborhood bar. Susie came with him. She was actually a stunning young woman now. The most surprising part was how friendly she was to me. We had a nice evening catching up. Charlie told some funny stories from college, but Susie didn't share much about herself. She seemed really interested when I talked about my experiences in Iraq. When we left the bar, she kissed me on the cheek and said it was great to see me again. Please stay in touch. Who was this girl? And what happened to Susan Scranton? I wondered with a smile. The next day, Charlie called and said, "Listen, Susan really likes you. She had a crush on you back then, but you never noticed." I could hear the grin in his voice. "You've got to be kidding," was all I could respond. Yep, sometimes girls can be a bit confusing that way, but she really does. And she has been through a rough time. She just couldn't handle college. Too many parties with too many privileged people. Too much alcohol and wild behavior. He continued, "I'm afraid she had to leave school and just got out of rehab. If you call her, just be gentle. And while I hate to say this about my own sister, it might be best not to get too serious with her. But last night was a lot of fun. Let's do it again soon." And we did. We started hanging out almost every week that summer. Sometimes Susie would come along and sometimes she wouldn't. I realized I missed her when she didn't come around, so I called her under some excuse, and we ended up having lunch together. During our meal, she started to share more about herself and opened up a bit. She kept saying sorry for being difficult with me, and I told her she didn't need to say sorry. I hadn't really noticed it back then, but now I found her quite attractive, and she had a nicer personality. This led to us becoming a couple, and eventually we fell in love. We made it official between us. Being close to Susie was amazing. She might not have done well in school, but she was good in other ways. I had my experiences too, but none compared to what I found with Susie. She always seemed happy with me, even if her parents weren't thrilled about us being together. We got married once I joined the police force in St. Louis County. I honestly don't remember asking her. It felt like she just made it happen. Soon after, she got pregnant, and our first daughter, Kimberly, was born just a year after we tied the knot. 2 years later, our son John arrived. 3 years after him, we welcomed our second daughter, Parker. And 4 years later, we had our little Abigail. All our kids are healthy and lovely, which I'm very thankful for. After each birth, Susan went through a bit of sadness for a month or two, but apart from that, she was a wonderful mother who loved our kids dearly. She didn't work outside the home, but I knew taking care of young children was a demanding job. After Parker was born, Susie started taking birth control pills again, like she had during high school and college. Her mood seemed to change a little, and she wasn't as calm and happy as she used to be. By then, I was away from home more than I liked because of my job in the Tactical Operations Unit, which involved a lot of training and night shifts. I'm not sure if she stopped taking her birth control on purpose or if it just didn't work, but she became pregnant with Abby. She decided to stop taking the pills after Abby was born almost 5 years ago, got her tubes tied, and nursed Abby for about 18 months. After that, things started to change a bit. Our relationship was never boring, but it certainly had its ups and downs. Life often felt like a roller coaster for us, with my work schedules and her dealing with pregnancies, breastfeeding, and chasing after our little kids. We both liked being close to each other, but sometimes the timing just didn't work out. There would be times when a whole week went by without any intimacy, followed by a long 2 hours together that felt wonderful. I believed we could manage this pattern. One major struggle for her was her parents, Edith and Stanford, and even her sister Janice, who didn't like me much. They thought I wasn't good enough for their daughter. They worried I couldn't provide the same lifestyle she was used to and wanted her to keep enjoying. It was funny, though, because they adored the grandchildren I helped bring into the world, but I knew they would have preferred someone richer. Janice's husband, Todd, was a lawyer with more money, and I was sure they gave her money now and then to help out. Neither of us spoke of it, but I didn't like it. It felt like it was causing problems in our marriage. After Abby stopped nursing, Susie started taking more time for herself. She had always looked good, but she gained a bit of weight after years of juggling motherhood. Now, she seemed focused on getting back to her college figure. She began dressing up more often, putting on makeup and even changing her perfume. Lately, she complained a lot about how little money I made and how I was hardly around to help. She said she needed a break. Our intimate life had mostly faded away about 6 months ago. We had been together maybe once or twice in that time. One of her ways to take a break was to go out with her friends for dinner and drinks while I watched the kids. I understood most of her feelings, but I didn't get the overall lack of closeness, especially since she was now looking fantastic again. It was supposed to be easy for couples to connect physically, especially as I stayed in shape with my job and training. I still felt I had a good attraction and definitely missed being close to her. Today was particularly frustrating. I told my captain I had something personal to take care of but would be available by phone if needed. I decided to head home early to talk to Susie. I arrived about an hour before I normally would. When I got home, I noticed Susie was all dressed up. "Oh, you're home early," she said, without any endearing names like honey or sweetheart. "Listen, I'm going out tonight and you're taking care of the kids," I said quickly. "Maybe you are, maybe you aren't," I replied in a serious tone. She seemed confused. "What?" she stammered. "We need to talk first, and you need to tell me what's happening." She seemed a bit defensive, looking around. "I think something is going on." "Nothing is going on. I just need a break tonight. Look me in the eyes and tell me who you're going to be with tonight and where." That's when her face turned bright red and things got tense. I felt like everything was falling apart. My peaceful home felt like it was in chaos. "All right, I'm meeting Jack tonight. He's taking me to dinner like a date, a real date, and I might thank him for it. There are so many nice guys in college. They treated me well, not like you. You're nothing. My wife has lost it." I thought that to myself. "Don't say that. Don't you dare. I have given you my best years and everything I have. What have you given me? Nothing. Because you're nothing. Jack is right about you. I'm taking the kids to my mom's, and I want you out of my house when I come back. You better be gone because I'm bringing Jack home tonight. I'm finally going to have some good time for myself. My wife has truly lost it. I wasn't about to let the kids get in the car with her right now." I nearly whispered, talking to myself. Charlie was right all along, and that's when she got really upset and called for help, saying I was hurting her. Then she called Jack to come to her rescue. The captain and Brandon showed up right after the police did. Jack was smart enough to stay away. My wife was crying and making all sorts of confusing claims, but there were no signs of any harm to her. The captain was kind and said, "Is anyone able to look after the kids tonight?" As much as I hated to agree, I said her parents. "Let's get them here, and you should probably leave for today. We can't leave you two alone like this. John, I'm really sorry about all this." "Yeah, me too," was all I could say. When her mother and sister arrived, I tried to talk to my kids, but they looked shocked and scared of me. They probably thought I had done something to their mom. Even I wondered if I had, although I didn't know what that could be. Brandon offered me his couch, but I chose to stay in a motel. I just wanted to be alone. I missed my family a lot. The next day at work, I glanced at Jack a few times, but he never looked back. Around 4 p.m., I received a restraining order. I was told I couldn't be within 500 feet of my home, my wife, or my kids. I took Jack aside to a private room. Half my team reached for their guns at how I looked and acted, but I waved them off. "What have you done, Jack?" He finally looked me in the eye and said, "All I did was be her friend. How could you have hurt her for all those years? Are you out of your mind?" "I never touched Susan like that, not once, not even in fun." "Why would she lie to me?" Jack asked. "I don't know, but she has. And if you believe her over me, you really don't know what you're talking about." I thought about how to get a lawyer. This was not going to end well. Susan's lies were strong and convincing, backed by her parents who trusted her completely. Little 12-year-old Kimberly was scared and confused through all of this. The restraining order stayed in place until a further review. Susie tried to smile like she won, but she looked confused. Even my own family seemed to support her and looked at me with pity. I thought I heard someone whisper about PTSD. About a week later, I got served again. Divorce papers came to me, and I learned something else. Jack was now bragging about how wonderful things were with Susan. She would do anything for him, and he was very likely going to pursue a deeper relationship with her once she got rid of me legally. Meanwhile, I thought about what Susan was feeling. I stepped into the bathroom and called Jack to talk for a long time. After John left and Edith and Janice took care of the kids, Jack was really nice to me. I had known him for a while as one of John's friends from his army days, and more recently as someone I worked with on the SWAT team. But we only started getting to know each other better about 4 weeks ago. About 6 months back, I began to really see John for who he was. Now he disgusted me in many ways, and he didn't even try to act like he was interested in me anymore. He must be with someone else. I started to fixate on this. Was it just one person, or was it many like Jack had done before? I knew about Jack's divorce from Connie. They had once been our friends. Edith and Janice encouraged me to get back into shape and put myself out there more. They said I deserved better than someone like John, someone like my dad or Todd, a man who could really care for me with nice things and a big house, putting me first, not just second to a job. So, I did that. I got back into shape. But John never even noticed, and I just grew more unhappy. I found myself thinking back to the happy times I had in college before John came back into my life. I was happy then. I was really happy at that moment and wished I could feel that way again. Maybe I just needed a little joy, so I started going out for dinner with Janice and some of her wealthier friends once a week. It was just us girls, a break from the kids and husbands. Some of us were still married, but we often invited 1 or 2 divorced friends. They always wanted to eat somewhere with dancing and a lively crowd. Janice liked that idea too. About 4 weeks ago, Jack was at the club. Janice and her friend Vicky were already dancing with some guys who had asked them. I had also been asked, but decided to play it cool. Then Jack came over to our table. After a bit of small talk, he asked me to dance, and I agreed. He was a handsome man, even out of his uniform. He was fit and strong like John, but seemed sweeter somehow. I felt a bit of danger since I knew he had cheated on Connie. It felt nice being in his arms while we danced slowly. I liked the way he held me. Maybe I could trust him, or at least manage to keep things in control for what I wanted. I started to share that I was having some problems with John. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said kindly. "We haven't been happy together for a long time, and he never touches me anymore." I sighed. Back in college, I was pretty wild. You might think less of me now as a wife and mother, but I wondered if I could trust you. "Absolutely," he replied with enthusiasm. I could sense he was interested in me. I felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "I just want a bit of joy again. Do you know where I could find some safely?" He smiled with a knowing look and said with a laugh, "I've got something for you." He casually handed me a pill, lightly touching my hand for a moment. I swallowed it down and took another big sip of my margarita, my 4th of the night. Finally, I felt a little happiness return to my otherwise dull life. Jack and I danced more, and I swayed my hips a bit. Jack wanted some quiet time with me, and I felt the same way, but just to a point. Janice had driven us, but was busy dancing with someone for a while. I told her Jack would take me home, and she smiled and gave me a thumbs up. I could tell she understood. Jack wasn't someone to settle down with, but he could be a fun distraction. Maybe he would help me get over John, and finally I could move on. In the car, we cuddled close, and he kissed me excitedly. I kissed him back, deeply, while he parked in my driveway, secretly hoping John might notice. After a little while, I went inside. It was around midnight, and everyone was mostly asleep, even John. I was feeling good, but also a bit restless. John could be a bit stingy with his feelings, but he had his moments. I was curious and wanted to feel close to him again one last time. I pulled back the covers and saw that he was asleep. Maybe he was dreaming about someone else, but I didn't think about that for long. I was focused on wanting to be with Jack. I started to gently touch John's chest to wake him up. I gave his face a light slap to rouse him, and when he began to mumble, I told him to stop talking and just be with me. I climbed on top and started to engage with him. I was still wearing my party dress, and I probably smelled like Jack's cologne. It had been a long time since John and I had been intimate, and I worried he might be seeing someone else. That thought made me lean down and kiss him. I felt a mix of emotions in that moment. I knew I was thinking about Jack, the man who had excited me so much. It had been a good night. About a week later, I was out with my friends while John watched our kids. I even struggled to connect with my own children, which made me feel sad. Every day felt heavy, and I blamed John for everything. It was all his fault. I had exchanged texts with Jack since our last meeting, and he knew where we would be that night. Janice was driving us, and 2 other friends were joining. They wouldn't see Jack as anything more than just another guy chatting with us. Janice was all for some fun on the side, and I figured out that she was probably involved in something similar. After dinner, Jack showed up, and soon we were dancing again. It seemed so natural. He looked excited, clearly thinking about our last time together. I began sharing how tough life with John had always been, how unhappy he made me and the kids. I even hinted at some moments when things were really tough. Jack seemed to absorb it all, growing more worked up about John than about me. It was almost amusing, but I wanted some happiness for myself. "Do you have it?" I asked him. He replied that he did, but wouldn't share unless we found a private place first. It felt a bit like a game. "Oh, Jack, please don't be difficult. I'm still married, even though it doesn't feel that way anymore." "Susie, I want to make you happy in every way. I don't just want a quick moment. I want us to be together properly, not just in a car. Where can we go?" "Let's go to my place. It's nearby." "That could work, but I can't stay too late, just until about 1 a.m., until I walk into my own front door. Do you get it?" "No." "Yes. I'll do what you ask, dear." "All right, let's do it now." "Okay, right. I can't enjoy certain fun things because of my job. But tonight I will, so we can really enjoy this together." And we did. I was thinking about it while I was in the restroom at the club. I took off my pantyhose before we left. Then I found Janice on the dance floor and told her I was leaving with Jack again. She noticed my pantyhose were gone and just smiled, saying, "Have fun, sis." I was surprised by that part of my little sister. As soon as we got into the apartment, our clothes came off, and Jack picked me up and took me to his bedroom. It felt amazing to have so much energy and happiness, which pushed us into that joyful moment for the next 3 hours. I didn't get home until 2 a.m. and still couldn't sleep. But as always, John was sleeping deeply, and I didn't need him anymore. I felt satisfied, but still a bit empty inside. The next morning, I felt even more sad. The thought of the next time with sweet Jack was the only thing that made it bearable. I could hardly talk because I yelled so much the night before. When I returned to John, I caught Jack in the restroom and got angry with him. He tried to fight back, but I was much stronger. I did my best not to ruin anything important, but I think I hurt his nose. After he woke up, I told him he could do whatever he wanted with that crazy girl now, but I better never hear a single rumor about it in our locker room again. If I ever found out he hurt my kids, he would have to answer for it. That made him turn pale. Message received. Later, Susan divorced me and Jack moved in with her. After a long investigation, I could finally see my kids again, but only with a chaperone at first. Kimberly especially seemed to dislike me now. She wouldn't hug me and spoke to me like her mom would, with clear disgust. The younger kids seemed a little happier, but still looked scared of me. It was easy to see that Mom, Grandma Edith, and Janice were saying bad things about me. Some of it was probably true since I had left them. My own mom might even have been on Susan's side. My life felt stuck right now, in a gray area between light and dark, between happiness and deep sadness. I couldn't lose focus at work. I had to make my child support payments, and my life could be at risk if my attention slipped. I had no money or energy to think about dating someone new. Let's see. Only 13 more years until little Abby turned 18. I was sure that by then none of my kids would want to talk to me. So I thought about how nice it would be to not have to worry about money for them anymore. It was during these thoughts that I sometimes cried a little. I drank too much and often found myself staring at a bullet and my gun in my hand. About a year into this life, I got shot. I was heading into a real estate office filled with bad guys and hostages. We had tried to negotiate, but we didn't really know how many bad guys were inside or where they were. Then tear gas went off, and we broke through the door. I came in with my shotgun ready. I thought my friends Brandon and Jack were behind me, but they were a bit delayed. Suddenly, I saw a bad guy behind me with a gun pointed at my head. Brandon shot him right in the back with his gun. The doctors later said it hit his spinal cord, which paralyzed him instantly. He didn't even have a chance to pull the trigger, but Jack's shot missed the bad guy and hit me in my leg instead. The bullet broke my pelvic and thigh bones, but my protective vest stopped most of the damage. However, a bone fragment cut my artery and I almost bled out right there. Luckily, the paramedics were already there and they saved my life. I was unconscious for about 2 days while they did surgeries on me. When I finally woke up, I had a strange dream. Susan was in my room, crying softly. She kept saying, "Oh, John, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what was wrong." I faded back into sleep, hearing her words over and over. When I fully woke up days later, Susan, Kimberly, and JJ came to visit me in the hospital. JJ was really happy because I had been on the news as a hero. Thankfully, none of the hostages were hurt, but 2 of the bad guys were dead, and another one was hurt. Even Kimberly seemed nice and happy to see me. I didn't know what to say to them, my own family. I tried to make a joke and said, well, Jack had his chance and missed. But Susan turned pale and rushed out of the room, looking like she might cry. Kimberly then said, "Mom's not feeling great right now. Jack doesn't live with us anymore and can't come around. Mom hasn't been happy for a long time since you left us. I was too worn out to argue with everyone and just needed some peace, so I told them I needed to rest. Susan brought my kids to see me every day, but we didn't talk. What was the point? We were in different worlds. I felt like I was from a normal place while Susan was from somewhere strange. We really didn't have anything to say to each other. At least the kids were friendly and not scared of me." Finally, Susan asked where I'd go when I got out. She said I would need help and she and Kimberly wanted to assist. I told her I was going to a rehab center, so I didn't need any help. I couldn't understand what was going on with Susan. Was she trying to take control of my life? I tried to stay polite, but I felt a bit uneasy. After everything that had happened in the last 16 months and the years before, I wasn't sure what to think. I planned to call Edith when I got settled and let her know about visiting hours. Maybe she could bring the kids to see me one weekend. I wanted to see my kids, but not Susan. I thought being around me was stressing her out. I didn't want her pity because I was recovering. I was alive and I would be fine again, but I planned to leave once I got better. When they all left, Susan didn't seem relieved. She looked sad. That was just how my life was now. At least Susan had moved on since I left. I had my own ways to cope, with a date here and there when I could. Sometimes I'd go out for a drink after work, still in my uniform, and meet someone for a brief encounter. Some women found the uniform appealing. Maybe that's all Susan ever noticed, not me. Now, about John. Brandon came to see me a few times, but Jack hadn't. Jack was on leave while everything was being looked into. The other officers said they thought Jack had stumbled and fired by accident, but it didn't look good. He might get kicked off the SWAT team no matter what. Being able to control your weapon is very important. Hurting a fellow officer on purpose for personal reasons is not good either. Best case, he could end up with just a regular police job. The worst part is that I could lose my job and even face a serious legal charge because Jack shot me in the leg. I also learned that Susan had really affected Jack's mind. She had gotten a restraining order against him and he scared her. I thought about my kids, who really needed me, and it made me feel helpless. I could only hope Jack remembered Heron. Heron was another bad person who would never hurt anyone again. I felt like I could figure out what went wrong. Jack believed everything Susan told him. She painted herself as a helpless woman in trouble, while I was seen as the villain, and Jack thought he was her hero coming to the rescue. When Jack learned about Bet, he was sure that Susan loved him as much as he loved her. He actually thought I was somehow controlling her thoughts, even before I could move properly again. Jack had already been arrested for breaking the restraining order. He was now on thin ice at work. One more slip-up, and he'd lose his job for sure. The police union couldn't help him this time. Jack was dangerously obsessed with Susan. He couldn't stay away from her. He got arrested again trying to break into her home, but luckily the police arrived just in time. Now he was in jail and Susan's mom was talking with his lawyer about bail. The judge was worried about bad press involving a police officer, especially after a recent case where a cop out on bail committed a crime. So he set bail at $1 million, and Jack stayed behind bars. Susan's mom did visit, bringing the kids almost every weekend. Sometimes they came by on both days. Suddenly, her mother, Edith, seemed much kinder to me. One time, she asked the kids to wait outside because she needed a private moment with me. I felt something was coming. Edith quickly apologized for believing Susan's lies. I just listened. She explained that Susan was struggling with her mental health, seeing a therapist, and taking medication. These changes were helping her a lot. Susan had a condition called bipolar disorder that no one noticed before. When she was in a manic phase, she lost control. Edith mentioned that taking birth control pills might have made her mental state worse, as those hormones can affect emotions too. She felt guilty for putting Susan on the pill when she was younger, thinking it would help keep her out of trouble. I noticed Edith seemed genuinely upset. Edith said that Susan felt terrible about how she acted and really wanted to see me again. She asked if I could possibly forgive Susan, her family, and herself for how they treated me. She stressed that the kids really needed me, as everything had been frightening for them. Edith's words faded as I felt anger rising. I couldn't help but think of how much pain their actions had caused my kids over the years. "Why shouldn't I hurt you?" She wouldn't admit it. She got tense and just walked away. I couldn't help but think, forget them all. Well, except for my kids. I'd think it over. I had a lot on my mind. Everything felt too neat and simple. Sorry, dear, for ending things and making life hard for Jack for so long. I was just not doing well mentally. But I'm better now. Come back home. She managed to convince everyone that I was the one with problems. Even our kids believed her. She could dress up nice and act charming around Jack, but not for her own husband. That told me a lot. She was also good at tricking Jack, who was supposed to be a smart police officer. He never caught her lies. She had a way with words that could confuse anyone. If she was the crazy one, why was Jack the one in trouble and not her? I slowly walked back to my small apartment. I was cleared to return to work, but just to desk duties for now. I still needed some time for therapy and training to be ready to get back into the field. The strangest part about going back was realizing how many people didn't support me anymore. Brandon was still my friend, and the captain backed me up, but everyone else felt I was to blame. Susan left me for Jack. Then things got messy with Jack getting locked up after losing control. Somehow it was all my fault. It felt crazy, but I didn't care. The captain assured me that I was still in line for a promotion and that good things were coming my way. "You'll be fine, John. Just hang in there," he said. I was ready to make changes through my old army buddies and the SWAT meetings I attended. After I became a sergeant, I was now seen as a hero. I got offered a job leading a smaller SWAT unit in Mobile, Alabama, and I accepted it after giving my notice in St. Louis. I also asked my lawyer to change my visit time with the kids from every other weekend to a whole month in the summer. I didn't want to do it, but I needed to move on from this mess. I felt like I could find a better future down south. I would feel safer with new people than with my old friends here. Then something big happened. Stanford had a heart attack and died. I wasn't going to his funeral. Maybe that seems harsh, but he never respected me, and I respected that even now. Maybe I could have gone and shown my true feelings, but I didn't. Just being honest. Charlie returned to town for the funeral and eventually reached out to me. He was now a prominent lawyer in Chicago, known for handling criminal cases. I had thought he might join the DEA, and he could still do that. The night after the funeral, we met at our old favorite spot. After some light conversation, he ordered a couple of drinks and said, "Come on, John, just one shot. Let's drink to the old man." I smiled and agreed. "I'm very sorry about Susan, John, I truly am. I wish I had known what was happening sooner so I could have been here." "Maybe. I don't know, Charlie. You warned me long ago, and I guess you were right," I replied. "No, I don't think I was. In the year after you left, I was glad you ignored my advice. Susan managed to turn herself around, and I really love my nieces and nephews. I plan to visit home more often now. Edith shared what she told you. It's not just talk." "Is that so?" I asked. "Yes, Susan is dealing with mental health issues, but it's manageable with the right help. She has a good psychiatrist who monitors her treatment and supports her through her feelings of guilt and sadness about you. She still cares for you deeply. She was under constant watch for 2 weeks after her last breakdown, the time she spent in a facility about a year ago. Did you know that?" Charlie said. "No, I didn't hear this before. What can I say, Charlie? I don't feel love for Susan anymore. The only way I can stay sane is by letting go of those feelings. But you don't hate her either, right? No, I won't. I'll be respectful and friendly towards her as the mother of my children if she can do the same. I just can't handle any more chaos. She has turned almost everyone I know against me. I need to stay cautious around her. You can tell her that if you wish. I'll speak to her, Charlie added. Everyone feels terrible about this, John. You didn't deserve it, and neither did Susan. She is struggling to understand all the hurtful things she said and did, he continued. That's what therapy is for. The issues she faces come from mental health struggles. I imagine you're finding this hard too. Just one more thing, Charlie said hesitantly. My father had many flaws, but he did provide for our family. My inheritance is about $1 million and Susan's is even more. Money shouldn't be a worry for her unless she recklessly spends it like some do. Seeing how she acts might help you decide what you think about her later on. Just a thought. We talked about many things, like his success as a lawyer and the woman he was dating. He wasn't sure if she was the one for him. He had dated many people and likely wasn't ready to settle down yet. We promised to keep in touch more than we had before. As we left the club that night, I almost told him about my phone. I sensed he wanted to change my mind about it, but at the end of the night, he said something else. He told me to remember the good years with Susan. He said she was a caring mother and a loving wife. He thought the other side of Susie wasn't the real her. Maybe that was true. But I know there's one person who really cares for that other Susie, and he's determined to win her back. But which Susie is the real one? Honestly, I can't say. I can't see into her heart. Only Susie knows who she is. I feel bad for her, for myself, and even a bit for Jack and my kids. Will she hurt them too, more than she has already? You need to watch her closely now, Edith. I once did that and it didn't help me at all. My friends and family weren't able to support me then. She made me feel very alone. Now I am as lonely as I ever was, but finally okay with it. Tell her if she really cares for me, to let things be. I hope she finds her own way because nobody has been hurt so far. Just me. I got a little upset. However, I'm getting some worrying letters from someone who is telling me to stay away from Susie. If you know what's best, tell Susie to stay safe, to think about herself and the kids, and not about me or any love we might have. Do you understand? He didn't seem happy, but he nodded and gave me a sad smile. Take care, my friend. I was on my way south. Now let's look at Susan's side. My life had become really tough over the past 2 years. I started feeling unhappy more often. At first it came and went, but then it stayed with me and turned into a deep sadness. In the beginning, I tried to ignore it and focus on my kids and John. I wanted to keep my unhappiness away from them. John worked hard and tried his best to provide for us. He had an important job, but his long hours away made me worried and frustrated. He felt bad that we were struggling financially. Money was often tight, and my unkind parents and sister seemed to take pleasure in reminding John of it whenever we gathered for holidays, birthdays, or even weekend barbecues. It happened every single time. John was always calm, even when people were rude to him. He kept his feelings to himself because he loved me and our kids. He accepted us completely, and I appreciated that about him. However, I started feeling worse and worse inside. I even lost the desire to be close to my handsome husband, a man I had wanted since I noticed him as a teenager. To feel better, I tried dieting and exercising a lot, hoping to fix myself. I dressed in nicer clothes, thinking that might help me feel good again, but none of it worked. I felt lost and scared. I began to convince myself that maybe it was John's fault. Some friends suggested that he was responsible for my happiness, and I started believing them. I started drinking more often and went out with my sister for dinner and drinks each week. Janice kept saying that John wasn't doing enough to make me happy. She doubted he ever could. Then things took a crazy turn with Jack. I thought that maybe since I was feeling so low, a little fun might lift my spirits. I couldn't go to straight-laced John for help, so I thought about Jack. I remembered how fun things were in college and forgot how they almost ruined my life. I figured Jack might have what I needed. Cops always know where to get things. When I first asked him, I thought it was a clever idea. But soon, things spiraled out of control. Yes, I felt a little good for a moment with Jack. He became obsessed with me and my stories. I told him I loved him and that I felt unhappy with John, and I believed my own lies. At that time, I did not feel any guilt. The false sense of love from the fun I was having felt real while it lasted. But once that feeling faded for me, I started to realize the mess I was in. Jack wanted to be close all the time, and we would sneak moments in whenever we could, even while the kids were with their grandparents or when John was around. We used drinks and a little something else to bring us closer. Jack loved to give me long massages, and we ended up in wild moments of passion. Afterward, I would be so tired that I could finally sleep for a few hours, but I would always wake up feeling worse. Waking up became a big problem. Not being able to find peace without those moments was even worse. Each time I woke up, I missed John more and more, but my anger toward him grew too. I started blaming him for everything, feeling like he had let me down. Somehow I felt it was his fault that I was with Jack and had divorced him. He shouldn't have left me and the kids. How could he do that? I found it hard to understand my own thoughts. The darkness I was in just kept getting deeper. This made John even more of an enemy in my mind. Although I was consumed by sadness, I told myself that my children would never leave me. I decided to win them over with my love and also turn them against their dad with lies, just like I did with Jack. They believed me more than Jack did. Then about 7 months into my time with Jack, who was almost living with me now, I woke up one morning after another wild night filled with mixed feelings. That night felt like I lost control, and when I finally fell asleep, I thought it would be for a few nice hours. When I woke up just 2 hours later, I was crying and couldn't breathe properly. I was having a major panic attack. Jack called for help, and I spent the next 4 weeks in a treatment center that my father, Stanford, found for me. I was lucky to be assigned to a great psychiatrist, Dr. Rachel Horowitz, who really tried to understand what I was going through. She probably saved my life. My parents took care of my kids without telling John what was happening, and he never found out. The kids were scared of their dad and hardly spoke to him anymore, especially Kimberly. During his weekend visits, which usually meant just watching a movie or eating pizza, no one mentioned where I had gone. At first, I was given lithium and Valium, which helped stop my crying during the first week. Then I started taking an antidepressant while they slowly reduced my Valium. By the second week, I began to feel better and started to remember everything from the past year clearly. That's when I started feeling hopeless. I had ruined my marriage in a way that could never be fixed, and I felt sure that John couldn't love me anymore after how I had treated him. I realized I had hurt my kids with all my lies and made them turn against their father. Strangely, I also took care of them more, treating them like important pieces in a painful game between me and John. I still couldn't understand why my parents and sister had allowed me to do this and even supported the destruction of my marriage. Why did they dislike John so much? Why didn't they see how I felt about him? In the happy years of my marriage, I did not respect John, and now I see that I hurt myself just as much. Many people who feel very sad sometimes think about hurting themselves more when they start to feel even a little better. This can happen as they find the energy to take action. However, my own feelings were much worse at this time. It was only after Dr. Horowitz felt sure I had gotten past the worst part and was starting to feel love and care for my children again that I began to see a glimmer of hope. I knew that if I were to end my own life, it would deeply hurt my children. So, I was allowed to leave the hospital, but I had to stay with my parents first instead of being alone with my kids. For the first 2 months, I met with Rachel 3 times a week. Rachel tried to help me understand why I had turned against John, the man I loved, who could have helped me through this tough time. Every couple has arguments and disagreements, every single one. What makes a marriage strong is not the absence of conflict, but how both partners handle their differences. Sometimes, each person has control in different areas, like taking care of the home, making decisions about kids, planning social events, and managing money. The best couples often find a way to agree silently about who is best at what. Sometimes the woman decides how to spend the money, and sometimes the man does. One partner might take the lead on social activities, while the other takes care of personal interests. There is always some need for compromise. In relationships where one partner tries to control everything, it usually doesn't work out well for either person. It's like a story where a husband treats his wife like a robot, and neither is truly happy in that situation. How long would a man stay interested in a robot instead of a real person? Or how can a woman find joy in a toy? People often want real connections instead of something that doesn't feel alive. Controlling people may try to dominate every aspect of the relationship. From what you've told me, you and John had a normal marriage with arguments, but also found good ways to work things out together. Take a moment to read Proverbs 31 and think about it over the next few days. Let's consider the value of a good wife and how, even in a time when men held most power in society, women still had strong voices. The wife made her own choices, and her husband, along with other men, respected her opinions. However, there were still struggles in those marriages, just as there can be in your own. John, for instance, may have felt like an opponent to you during your time together. Of course, you couldn't ask John to get you something that could harm you, like drugs, even if you felt you needed them at the time. As your health worsened, your feelings and thoughts about John and your marriage began to change. It's important to remember that people are not always logical. If we were purely logical, we wouldn't make certain choices that involve risk and pain, like having children. In simple terms, why would a reasonable woman choose to go through the challenges of pregnancy and childbirth? Yet many women today are deciding to have fewer or no children at all. This trend is notable in many modern countries where women, wanting to make smart choices, often choose not to expand their families. Our thoughts and feelings are influenced by many factors, like hormones and brain chemicals. Each day we make countless decisions based on incomplete information. For example, when you're on a date, you might wonder what the man across from you is really thinking. While we might think he has certain intentions, we always question if it's real love or just a passing interest. This leads to playful flirting as we try to gather the right information to make a good decision. Men face similar challenges. Women can sometimes feel more complex and harder to understand, according to many men I've spoken with, including family members. But as your health changed, you lost touch with your feelings and instincts that told you that you loved John and he loved you. This shift occurred due to changes in your brain. With those feelings diminished, you were left with only logic to explain your unhappiness. As a result, your mind may have led you to blame John for your discontent. This left you feeling more like a machine, unable to connect emotionally. The part of your brain that likes to think logically led you to try to feel better with things like alcohol, fun times with friends, and seeking comfort with someone else besides John. You decided John couldn't help you because he was part of the problem. He had been there when you started to feel upset and lost. Honestly, I could see you questioning all of this, and it was a lot for Rachel to explain to me in our meeting. It was the first of many chats where I mostly spoke, trying to make sense of things on my own. Rachel wrapped up our session with some important points. She said, "You are a smart woman, maybe even smarter than Charlie. But," she warned, "sometimes being very smart can come with problems in how our minds work. Your brain chemistry might have naturally changed as you got older. It could also be that taking birth control and other substances in high school and college had caused some issues, which might have gotten worse after Parker was born. There seems to be a link between these changes and people with bipolar disorder based on what we know. You have a strong will and really want to get your husband and family back, just like before. Talking to John feels like the next step. But please, don't do that right now. There's still a lot we need to work on, both in therapy and with your medication, to help you reach a stable place in your mind. We might even get you to stop taking medicine one day, but that's going to take time. If you try to see John too soon, it could set you back even more." I understood what she was saying, but it was hard to agree with her. I really wanted to see and talk to John again. I believed he would understand once I explained everything, but I chose wisely to wait a little longer. Instead, I focused on being honest with my kids. I needed to tell them the truth, not the lies, but that was harder than I thought. Kimberly especially wouldn't listen. She insisted that it didn't matter. "He left us. He's stronger than you, and he shouldn't have gone. If he really loved us, he wouldn't have done that." I tried to explain how I had managed to get a restraining order and that the police and the courts were on my side, but she didn't believe me. To her, I seemed more confused than before. I had been nice, calm, and strong for them, and now I felt lost. Now I was feeling nervous and unsure of myself. I worried about how John saw me. It struck me that things were not okay. Every day I thought today might be the day when my medicine stopped helping and I would slowly lose my grip on reality without realizing it. The medicine also had some side effects. They made it hard for me to feel desire. I told myself that was probably a good thing for now. But I knew it wouldn't be enough if John ever wanted to be close to me again. I would rather be in a loving relationship than just be alone right now. But I understood that John couldn't deal with me if I wasn't responsive, and I couldn't pretend to be okay. Then John got shot. That almost made me fall apart completely. I kept myself together just enough. Oh, how I wished it had been me instead of John. I felt I deserved it, not him. I was helpless and wanted to help him so much. At least Kimberly was starting to believe me a bit more. Jack, however, was becoming a big problem. Jack didn't believe anything I said and kept trying to see me. I worried he might have hurt John on purpose. If he did, I felt responsible for that too. I felt sorry for Jack and tried to let him down gently. I told him I was dealing with serious mental issues, was in therapy, and was slowly getting better. I also told him I was sorry for leading him to think I had feelings for him. The truth was, I never had any feelings for him, and I never would. It was hard to share that with someone, especially when just 2 months before, things had been very different between us. He just couldn't understand and wouldn't believe me now. It seemed he was caught up in what we had even if it wasn't real. He ignored what I said about my medicine making me feel numb to everything. He kept saying, "I just want to care for you." Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wanted something more. In the end, I had to get a restraining order to keep him away from me and the kids. He still didn't stop until he got into trouble with the law. Then, my dad passed away suddenly. He wasn't perfect, but he was my dad. It was hard to cope with everything, and I ended up back on Valium just to get through the funeral. Charlie stepped in to help manage things. Edith was struggling. Janice was dealing with her own troubles since Todd had found out about her recent choices and was now leaving her. Janice was feeling sad, not because of any illness like me, luckily, but because dating strangers was not fun anymore. She had been married to a rich older man who took care of her, but that was gone now. Janice even pointed fingers at me for her own troubles. I was starting to see my family in a new light, looking at them more clearly than before. Talking to a therapist helped with that. Suddenly, Janice had to watch how she spent her money. She received some all-right support for a while, but her own inheritance was smaller than Charlie's. My dad thought she had picked a good husband and did not bother to help her much. I received about $2.5 million for me and my kids. My dad wanted to support me as much as he could. He may have thought this would bring John back to me. In the end, Stanford realized how badly he, Edith, and Janice had messed up by disrespecting John. He saw how I had struggled, and how I still loved John, wishing to go back to what we once had. But Stanford never understood how little money meant to John. John just wanted me to be happy and content, and my new wealth might actually push him away for good. I told my lawyer to stop his support payments to me, at least to do that much for him. Charlie also shared his last chat with John. He said John no longer felt hate for me, but was scared to love me again. Maybe this was good news. Perhaps it was a small chance I could work with once Rachel allowed me to try. I might have been coming off the medication when I got the last bit of tough news. John was moving about 650 miles away to Mobile, Alabama, right by the Gulf Coast. Would I ever see him again? Would I get to explain everything and why his kids needed him? I believed he needed them, and maybe he needed me too. Now, let's view it from John's side. I arrived in Mobile on March 15th, a sunny day with temperatures in the 70s. The dogwoods were blooming, and I had passed many oak trees draped with Spanish moss. This was definitely not Missouri anymore. It was a long drive, but I made it in one day with just me and my belongings in the car. That was all I brought with me. I would stay in a motel tonight and look for a furnished apartment tomorrow. It was a fresh start. I looked forward to my new job. I had some new duties and was looking forward to seeing an old friend, Benjamin "Frenchie" Francois. He was a Cajun from Mobile and my best buddy in Iraq. Now he was a police officer in the same city. The Cajun community around Mobile had been around for a long time. They worked in the forests, swamps, and on farms. Many were employed in paper mills and other factories, while others caught shrimp and crabs in the Gulf. Mobile had lots of water and swamps, with Mobile Bay being about 20 miles long and 5 miles wide. The bay was usually only 6 to 8 feet deep at low tide, but it had deep channels for big ships. Mobile Bay was quite muddy, especially compared to clearer waters like Pensacola or Destin in Florida. It marked a border. To the east were the resort towns and beautiful beaches of Gulf Shores and Pensacola, as well as Fort Walton Beach and Destin, known for their white sand and clear waters. Traveling south from Mobile Bay, you would find muddy Gulf waters in areas like Mississippi and Louisiana, all the way down to Texas. The Mississippi River added to this muddiness by carrying lots of dirt and silt into the Gulf. Mobile Bay received dirt from several local rivers as well, including Dog River, Fish River, and Mobile River. Those rivers were part of a waterway system that helped transport goods more easily to the Gulf than through New Orleans. With all this water, my new SWAT team needed to be ready for any situation involving boats or water. We might deal with everything from accidents on houseboats to issues with fishing boats and even large cargo ships that could be targets for crime or terrorism. My mind raced just thinking about driving down I-65 and the challenges ahead in my new role. I was excited to meet up with Frenchie to catch up and also learn about the current SWAT operations. However, I had to be careful not to show too much favoritism since he was my friend. It was important that everyone on the team was treated equally for promotions and evaluations. Unless Frenchie had completely changed, I didn't think he would cause any problems with team unity. He was a big, friendly guy who loved to talk. He was easy to get along with until someone made him angry, then he responded quickly and firmly. He was one of those tough, strong guys. I played as a fullback in high school and got a small basketball scholarship to a faraway college, which I decided not to take. He was a starter for the Alabama football team for 2 years until partying caught up with him, and then he joined the Army. I had 3 days before my new job started, just enough time to find my rented apartment online and settle in a little. I finally met up with my friend Frenchie at a small place called the Blue Crab Bar and Restaurant. The breaded fried crab claws were really good. Frenchie was excited about their crawdad gumbo, but I wasn't so sure. Maybe it was a taste you had to learn to like. Frenchie had just gotten married to a lovely Cajun woman named Gigi. She was beautiful in the pictures Frenchie showed me, with slightly darker skin, jet black hair, and very dark brown eyes. Gigi had a mix of French, African, and Native American roots, and she spoke a unique form of French. It was her voice that got me, Johnny boy. She sang beautifully and even sounded great just talking. I was mesmerized. When I asked Frenchie about his wife and kids, he said he hadn't heard anything. It wasn't happening. She divorced me and I showed him my empty ring finger. "Oh no, what happened, Johnny?" he asked. "You have 4 kids, right?" I shrugged. I don't know, just me being me, I guess. Suddenly she wasn't with me anymore and was with someone else. Now she and my kids pretty much don't want anything to do with me. Her family was kind of wealthy and didn't like me much. I guess she realized they were right. I heard she went through some tough times with her mental health, but who knows? I can't talk to any of those people except her brother Charlie, and he's busy with his life in Chicago. I hate being far from my kids, but maybe sometime apart is what we all need right now. I hope we can reconnect better when I have them for a month or 6 weeks after school ends this summer. "Well, you need a Cajun woman," Frenchie joked. "Or maybe not for you right now. That can be risky. But you should meet my sister Janine. She just divorced her husband." I chuckled. "Good thing, or I might have been tempted myself," he added. "But she could be fun as a friend. Just think about it." I agreed more cheerfully than I felt. I couldn't picture a female version of Frenchie, a tough Alabama woman. "So Monday's the big day for you?" he asked. "Sounds like we need to do some serious drinking tonight." And that's exactly how we spent the evening. It wasn't really a fight, but we did shout at each other for a bit. In the end, a couple of police officers who knew my friend Frenchie well took both of us out of the bar and drove us to my motel room in their car. We both ended up crashing there, so on Monday morning I found out I had a bit of a reputation at work as Frenchie's friend who couldn't handle his drinks. Not exactly what I hoped for, but it turned out okay. The first week of April, I got a letter from Susan. It was a short note saying she had a new cell phone number and wanted me to call her about the kids visiting me this summer. She wanted to discuss the details, so I gave her a call. "Hello, John," she said. There was something different about her voice, maybe calmer. "Hi, Susan. I got your letter. Let's try to figure this out nicely, okay?" I said. "Of course. "I want us to work together, but I have some plans," she replied. I thought to myself, oh no, but I hoped it would work out for her too. I've rented a 3-bedroom condo in Gulf Shores for 2 weeks starting June 10th. You may have heard I got some money when my dad passed away. I bought a new BMW SUV and will drive us all there. This way, you won't have to travel far to get the kids for your month or however long you want this summer. I thought it was great that she was planning. If you want to, you could join us for a week at the beach. You could stay with JJ, and it might help us all reconnect. Just think about it and let me know what you decide. She seemed more reasonable now, making it harder to argue with her. Thanks for the offer. I will think about it. Are the kids there? Can I talk to them for a moment? I asked. Kimberly is at a friend's place studying, but everyone else is here. Hold on. Then I heard her calling for JJ, Parker, and Abby to come over. We had a nice conversation. The kids seemed much more relaxed and friendly with me. JJ was especially excited about the beach again. He had gone twice before with Stanford and Edith and once with Susan. They even had a family trip to Sandestin while I stayed home to work. I never minded that too much back then. I was focused on my job and didn't want Susan's parents to pay for me. But I didn't want my family to miss a chance for a nice vacation and time with their grandparents, who were covering most of the cost. Now, I was just happy. Things seemed a little more normal in my family life. I hoped it would stay that way. I tried to talk to my kids at least twice a week, and usually it worked with everyone but Kimberly. She was often busy, and even when we did have time to chat, it felt like we still weren't connecting. She remained distant with me. She was now 13 and starting her teenage years, but the divorce happened at the worst time for my daughter, Kimberly. Suddenly, her father was no longer in her life. I worried about how this change would impact her relationships with boys and men as she grew older. I hoped that Susan's mental health issues were not something Kimberly would inherit, especially with everything else going on. I missed the days when we were all together and wished I could have them with me for a month or so every summer. But making that happen this first time was going to be difficult. My small 2-bedroom apartment would be very cramped. Luckily, it had 2 bathrooms, but I would need to arrange for someone to help look after the kids since I couldn't take an entire month off work. What if I got an urgent call one night? I couldn't leave Kimberly alone even if she was 13. My job was not just about earning money, it was about helping others. It was important, sometimes even critical, for people facing danger. I loved my children, but I knew I wasn't the best dad. Even when I was married, Susan did most of the parenting. I admired her for that and was thankful for all she did. As far as I could see, even with her struggles, Susan tried her best to be a good mother, even if she sometimes spoke against me. It made sense in a way because of my job, but it still didn't make it easy. I knew I wouldn't be able to give Kimberly the same attention Susan did while she was always there for them. Susan had been a stay-at-home mom, and even now, as a single parent, she managed well enough on her own. But I had to be available for my job even if it meant missing time with my kids. Life could be tough, and it wasn't fair. No one had it all. I knew I might need to make some hard choices soon, maybe even set aside my feelings for the sake of my kids. One night after work, while having a drink with my friend Frenchie, I shared some of these worries. We talked about how we managed to get things done. He interrupted my thoughts, saying, "You really should come to my family cookout this Saturday. It's at my sister's country house. Any time after noon is good, but the sooner the better." He gave me her address and directions, saying Google Maps may not work well for the area. When I arrived a little after 1, I was surprised to see more than 100 people there already. They were grilling sausages, hamburgers, hot dogs, and shrimp. Large pots of gumbo and crawfish were boiling, filling the air with delicious smells. All kinds of side dishes were being prepared, and big tubs were filled with sodas and beer. There were also large containers of lemonade and sweet tea, which is popular in the South. Long tables were set up, and kids were running around enjoying themselves. A Zydeco band was getting ready with a great sound system. There were microphones for singers and a lot of different instruments like fiddles, accordions, guitars, and homemade drums. A portable dance floor was being put out. I had a feeling that a good time was about to start. I wasn't the only non-family member there. Just friends were around too. I saw some people from the police department and 3 other members of my SWAT team, including Karen Rigby, the only woman in tactical operations training. Frenchie spotted me and brought me over to meet G and his sister. She seemed to be directing everything that was going on. As the hostess, she was also in charge of the food. "This is Ginny," Frenchie said. "This is my old army buddy, John Thornton." She smiled and said, "Hello, John. I hope you can handle the chaos here today. Benny has told me a lot about you." She had a sparkle in her eye that matched her cute dimples. She was a little shorter than her brother, maybe about 5 feet 3 inches and very petite. There was no way she could play football in Alabama. They both had the same dark hair and always looked tan, with very dark brown eyes. But Ginny was definitely prettier than Benny. It seemed Frenchie wasn't his only name here. I felt a little nervous and managed to say, "Thanks for having me over." She laughed lightly, saying, "Just make sure you eat enough and maybe we can chat a little later. Having a good time is the most important thing." Then she went back to helping people in a kind way with her soft voice and lovely accent. "What do you think of my sister, Johnny boy?" Frenchie asked. "She seems very nice," I replied, though I felt a bit shy. Many other guys were around who might use that nickname. He chuckled. Then a stunningly beautiful woman walked up and hugged him from behind. She looked like a model, very graceful and mysterious. I'd seen her picture before, but seeing her in person was breathtaking. "Mont," Frenchie said, smiling. "This is my wife, Gigi, and this is my new boss, John Thornton." "Hello, John. I expect you to keep Benny safe," she said, her voice warm. All I could respond with was, "Yes, we look out for each other." It was hard to promise anything else because of how I felt when she spoke. I could see why Frenchie married her. She smiled at me and said, "Please dance with me when the music starts, okay?" Frenchie laughed and added, "All Cajun women love to dance." "You really need to know how to dance, Johnny, if you plan to stick around here," she said. "I thought I could manage. Susan and I took some ballroom dance classes for about a year before Kimberly was born. I've always enjoyed music and dancing, even back in high school. I learned that being happy and relaxed is very important for a man on the dance floor. Most women appreciate that. When dancing, women want to be noticed and show their skills. Partner dances are a bit more complex, but listening to the rhythm and having a strong lead really matter too. I watched what others did on the dance floor and thought I could just mimic the basic steps. Maybe if I had a few beers first, it would help. It was a great party. The music and dancing really picked up after everyone had eaten and had a few drinks. The tunes were fantastic, and Gigi and her sister Frances sang often, sometimes joined by a band member. Their singing was so beautiful that it really moved me. The dancing lasted late into the night. The band took breaks, but other musicians kept coming in. I danced with Gigi, Frankie, Ginny, and a few other women who weren't shy about pulling me onto the dance floor when they saw I could keep up. The dance was mainly a cowboy two-step, more about moving side to side than around the floor. Frenchie danced a lot too. In fact, nearly everyone did. What surprised me was that even with all the drinking and dancing, no one got out of control or acted too wild. There were no jealous moments or excessive flirting. With so many people, there might have been some hidden romances. Or maybe not. It reminded me of a big family gathering where everything seemed nice and peaceful, like no one wanted to upset the balance. It was interesting. Maybe alligators in the nearby swamps kept everyone polite. I enjoyed talking with Ginny. She was really sweet. I met her 9-year-old son Joey along with other family members. There were so many cousins, aunts, and uncles. "So you have 4 kids?" she asked. "Yes. They live back in St. Louis," I replied. "That must be tough for you." "Yes and no. The divorce happened so suddenly. It felt like my wife suddenly turned against me and spent 6 months saying bad things about me to our kids." "You still loved her?" "Yes, I did. I've heard from her family that she went through a tough time which caused her to act this way. But what is true? At least we can talk to each other more nicely now. It's really surprising. My kids also seem to act more like themselves when I'm around. They're all coming down here in June, and I will have them with me for at least a month. So, do you have a house here now?" "No, I think I made a mistake and just rented a 2-bedroom apartment when everything in my life was still a mess. Let's talk again later, okay?" she said as someone asked her to dance again. I had to admit, my legs were starting to feel tired. I needed another beer to help me relax. Around 1 a.m., the party started to slow down and the band finally packed up. About 30 of us were still in a good mood. Frenchie told me to find a spot in the house to stay for the night. It was a big house with at least 4 bedrooms. The women and kids were settled upstairs. The older boys and men found places downstairs. There were lots of air mattresses and old blankets everywhere. Many of the guys slept outside because they had brought their camping gear, like bags and thermoses just in case. The next morning, there was another big breakfast that started early because most planned to go to church that Sunday. I felt a bit hungover, but strong coffee, scrambled eggs, and lots of bacon helped a lot. These folks knew how to cook for a crowd and could open a restaurant anytime they wanted. Soon, almost everyone had left except for Frenchie, his wife Jenny, her cousin Carla, and me. Jenny and I finally had some time to talk. "I've been thinking," she started. "How would you like to rent half my house when your kids are here? I have 5 large bedrooms with bunk beds set up in 3 of them. It's just me, my son, and Carla, along with her 8-year-old daughter, Kaylee. We can make space for you and your kids, and we wouldn't mind babysitting. Plus, we could use some extra money." She smiled. I was surprised by her kindness. I realized what she was offering, and I found it hard to say no. "Oh, wow," I said. "It feels like a dream come true, but I just can't say yes right now. Let's at least try it out. If there are any big issues at the start, I can back out. No hard feelings." "Okay, sure, John. That sounds good. And don't be a stranger before then either." "Okay. I have a feeling I won't be." Suddenly, I had a friend in Mobile who was not in uniform. My job was going well and helped me feel better. Living alone felt lonely without a wife, and now my kids were always around. Truth be told, I always liked that before, without thinking much about it. Of course, it was never perfect, but those last 6 months of my marriage made me see how nice it was to have a little bit of imperfection in my life. Now, living by myself was just something I dealt with when I wasn't working or hanging out with friends like Jenny, Carla, Frenchie, and Gigi. I always had fun when we spent time together. Sometimes we would go to a movie, especially action films like SWAT. Afterward, we'd talk about it and laugh. We also enjoyed dancing to live music, but honestly, the bands were rarely as good as the ones at our family gatherings. It seemed like every time we went out, the musicians would get everyone excited until the singer took the stage. If someone got too drunk and bothered Gigi, Frenchie and I would step in. Usually, I would just show my badge, and that would settle things. If things turned rough, we would handle it by restraining the person and calling the police for being drunk and causing trouble. Thankfully, this didn't happen often since Gigi was so well-liked. It felt like we were helping these troublemakers by stepping in instead of letting the crowd deal with them. None of our girls would dance with strangers in those public bars. They only danced with cousins or good friends, and we often bumped into friends we knew. I discovered I was the only one who really needed to learn about handling situations on water. Everyone else, except for Karen, had already taken seminars. Tactical waterborne operations was taught by an experienced ex-Navy chief named Steve Bronson. He covered the basics very well. The most important part was simply staying safe around water. If you fell off a dock while approaching a boat, it could lead to serious trouble, especially with heavy gear on. The first lesson was to stay calm in such situations, learn self-rescue methods, get rid of unnecessary gear, and use a swimmer's vest for flotation. I also needed to master safe swimming techniques, fast diving from boats, and how to aim accurately with a rifle while floating. My team included a qualified sniper and a second good backup. I also had one skilled underwater technician with 2 others in the police boating unit, one ex-Navy and one with commercial experience ready to help when needed. Another important skill we practiced was boarding boats and larger ships. The Navy had developed methods for this, like visit, board, search, and secure techniques, as well as helicopter boarding methods. We could use these methods in emergencies, but they wouldn't be our first choice. Instead, we focused on quickly approaching small boats and using flexible ladders to board moving ships. Maybe we should all watch Black Sails. The Coast Guard sometimes let us practice on one of their boats. One of my main jobs was to keep in touch and build good relationships with the Coast Guard, the FBI, their HRT, and even the Navy and possible SEAL teams. If a large foreign cargo ship looked like it was in trouble, the issue with calling in such skilled help was that we needed them fast when things went wrong. At some point, we might have to handle things on our own, and we could never be too prepared. Sadly, my 2 officers were mainly just regular cops and couldn't be full-time SWAT team members, waiting for calls like firefighters or always in training. City police budgets were just too tight. Another part of my job was to manage schedules and plan where everyone was. When my officers were assigned to narcotics or out patrolling, using their gear already loaded in their cars, I always tried to keep a couple of them in the office with me. They would work on paperwork and be ready to respond quickly if needed. I aimed for our whole team to be ready and on site anywhere in our city, whether on land or water, within 1 hour of a call. I also spent a lot of time on physical training. I could now dance reasonably well, but I still needed to improve my running speed. My goal was to meet a minimum fitness level for myself and my team. I often used Karen Rigby to inspire us all. She may not have had the upper body strength of the guys, but she had played soccer and basketball during school, and she could easily meet the running standards. I always encouraged her to push herself during our weekly training sessions. Eventually, everyone improved, including me. We all got close enough to our goals and stayed dedicated. Running is not easy or fun for some, but we all have to deal with the tough parts to achieve what we want. My life was settling down well, and I felt ready for a week off after just 3 months in my new job to see my ex-wife and kids in Gulf Shores. I was more nervous driving there than I ever remembered being during an emergency. Just be friendly and relaxed, I kept telling myself. When I arrived, Parker and Abby rushed over to hug and laugh with me. Even JJ wanted a hug and was talking excitedly. Only Kimberly and Susan were a bit more reserved, but they were smiling. Maybe it would be okay. We just kept busy, and that seemed to be the key. We spent hours at the beach with Abby and Parker, having fun playing in the sand. Meanwhile, JJ and Kimberly enjoyed the waves, and Kimberly started getting some attention from a couple of boys who wanted to teach her how to surf with their boards. Did I keep an eye on them? Absolutely. One of my biggest distractions was how good Susan looked in her swimsuit. It wasn't too revealing, but it wasn't very modest either. She seemed so friendly and supportive of me and the kids, which made it hard for me to sleep well at night while bunking with JJ. Abby, Parker, and Kimberly shared another room, while Susan slept in the main bedroom with a big bed. Most nights, Abby would sneak in there before dawn, which meant I ended up taking longer showers. Susan and I didn't have much time alone until late Wednesday night. The kids were worn out from another long day in the sun and went to their rooms by 10 p.m., even Kimberly. Susan and I relaxed together, sipping some wine and watching a movie like Must Love Dogs. It was during that time we started to talk. I received a notice from the court saying I no longer had to pay alimony. I guess that's good. I don't need the money now, and it wasn't fair to you. I regret divorcing you. Maybe you should have divorced me, considering how I acted back then. There was a bit of silence. Charlie said you had some mental health issues, but I'm still confused about what you did. It felt like you put all your problems on me while acting fine with everyone else. Everyone seemed to believe you too. I'm still struggling, John. I'm on medication for depression that helps me, but it has some side effects. I'm also working with a doctor to address other issues. I've been dealing with this for a long time, definitely since I was a teenager. So, you didn't love me and marry me when you were mentally okay? Oh, I loved you then and still do. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Therapy has helped me remember things more clearly now. What did you think of me when we first met? Well, I think I was 14 and you were just 12, right? Yes, back then you were just Charlie's annoying sister to me. You were a skinny girl. What about when I turned 14, after you started to grow up? By then, you were still just seen as my friend's sister and just as annoying. You acted like you didn't care for me at all after that. For me, when I was 14, it felt like I was seeing you for the first time. I wanted you so much that it scared me. No other boy or man ever made me feel that way. My feelings of doubt and fear grew stronger. The fear that you wouldn't like me made me act different when you were near. My heart would race, and I would start to sweat and shake from nervousness. It was a mix of wanting you and being afraid of you. I really wonder what might have happened if you had noticed me back then. I probably would have done anything to be close to you and keep you in my life, but not in a healthy way. I don't think I've been completely okay since I became a teenager. I lost my virginity at 15 to a boy I didn't care much about, someone I thought was safe and could control. That was the only time I was with him, and I hardly remember it. It wasn't important to me. You were what really mattered, even just seeing you in the school hall or at lunchtime. The feelings of wanting you and fearing you never went away. I cried when you graduated and left to join the army. I thought high school would be better for me, but I just got wilder. I started trying alcohol and drugs and had a few more experiences. I acted like I was happy, but I wasn't. College was even worse, and I went too far. I think I was trying to feel better, but it only made things harder. Getting away from all that was good for me, and the help I received was useful. But I stopped too soon. Luckily, my mind wasn't completely messed up yet, but it was close. Then Charlie told me you were back in town and getting together with you. I finally decided that my feelings for you were stronger than my fear of being rejected. I kept telling myself to grow up. Then I saw you again. After 4 years, you looked even more beautiful than I remembered. I hoped and prayed you'd call and want to see me, not just as Charlie's sister. And you did. I had 13 amazing years with you, John. Then I messed it up. I can't blame everything on depression or other issues. The fear of losing you came back, and I let it take over. I made bad choices, and now I have to live with them, just like you do. It wasn't your fault at all. I never deserved you. Sometimes we hurt the ones we love, and we often bring our worst fears to life. That's what I did. I wasn't strong enough. I've never been. This was a lot to think about. I poured us both some more wine. That was Susan's second drink, and I knew that would be enough for her. She was really careful about how much she drank. I thought to myself, Susan, you are so strong. You've had 4 kids and raised them mostly on your own. That takes a lot of bravery every day. You have such a strong personality. Yes, sometimes I can pretend to be confident and sure of myself, but when I make choices, often they come from my deepest fears and doubts. That's what gets me in trouble. It's like I made poor choices, like trying to get Jack's attention for my own needs. I made things difficult for him, too. But honestly, he shouldn't have gotten involved with me, no matter how I acted. His behavior was wrong, and I should not feel guilty about it. I just hope he gets his life together and stays away from us now. I feel nothing for him, just like those boys from high school and college. I know this may be hard to explain fully because it's all so tangled. And I understand if you find it hard to trust me. I wish you could talk to my therapist, Rachel. She wanted to meet you when we reached this point in our conversation. Just a bit. But you were down here. Are you staying here now? Yes, for the near future. It has been a good change for me. I needed to leave St. Louis for personal and work reasons. I feel sad to be away from my kids, but I know I made mistakes. I just wish. And she went quiet. What do you wish? That I could go back and change many things. I should have asked for help instead of thinking you would leave me if you found out how unhappy I really was. I wish I had trusted your kindness and your love for me. I saw tears in her eyes, but she stayed strong. If this was all just an act, then nothing would ever feel real again. Should I let her fear affect me and my decisions? Emotions can be confusing, but what's done is done. We can only live in the present, each day as it comes, and focus more on what's ahead than what's behind. Right. We also need to keep our kids as our top priority. Yes. I'll do my best to never use your children as weapons in my own silly games. I think I've helped get them back on a good path, except for Kimberly. She's going through that tough teenage phase. I am a bit worried about that. That was the time I lost my way in my own life. The last few days we've spent together have been really great for me. I bet you can't imagine how much I've enjoyed this time. And don't worry too much about Kimberly. She's doing fine. Most importantly, remember you aren't your mother, and I am not your father. I know I haven't been around as much as I wanted to be, even before our divorce. But I hope Kimberly knows just how much I love her. I always have and always will. I hope to spend more time with her over the next 6 weeks. After a moment of quiet thinking, Susan sighed. Can I sit next to you for a bit and watch TV? Would you put your arm around me like you used to? She asked, looking down. I felt tense but told myself to relax and said, okay. She moved close to me, resting her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. She felt both familiar and slightly distant now. I could still smell her scent, the same as it had always been for the 13 years we were together. We were close in many ways, but I realized I never truly had her thoughts, just as she never had mine. Each of us has our own ideas and feelings. The only one who might understand everything is God. I still felt attracted to her, which was confusing. Why did everything have to be so complicated? After a while, she leaned against me and I could feel her crying softly. I could only run my fingers through her hair and hold her close. Eventually, she calmed down and I could tell she was falling asleep. My own worries started to fade as I focused on the moment. Before I knew it, I drifted off to sleep too. For the first time in over a year, I had a peaceful sleep without any dreams. The next morning, I woke up and found myself still on the couch. I was lying on my back with Susan half on me, her head resting on my chest and one of her legs draped over mine. We were both in comfortable sweatpants. Abby was shaking Susan awake, excited for breakfast and a fun day at the beach. Abby didn't see my morning surprise, but Susan did and smiled at me. If Abby and the kids hadn't been around, I might have acted differently. I kissed Susan gently on the forehead and played with Abby's hair as we got untangled, and I went to take a shower. I took a longer shower than usual, trying to sort through my feelings and figure out what was best for all of us. One day at a time. Things were looking up from here. Things felt more relaxed, and there were more smiles and laughter in the house. The kids seemed to have figured out that their mom and dad had spent the night together again, even if it was just on the couch. That was a good thing. It felt normal. That night, Susan and I found ourselves alone in the living room again because the kids went to bed earlier than usual. We were watching TV. I was sipping on a beer while Susan had a Diet Coke. She sat down on the couch next to me, and it felt like I could read her thoughts. She seemed a bit bold again, but she hesitated as she sat right next to me. I lifted my arm and placed it on the back of the couch, and then she moved closer to me. I looked down at her, and she had this big smile on her face that made me want to laugh. It felt like she was thinking hard. She wanted to say something, but I decided to wait. I could feel her heart beating quickly. Eventually, I said, "Honey, could we finish watching this in the bedroom? I don't mind sleeping on the couch with you, but there's a nice big bed in there if you want to share." I noticed she had been rubbing her neck a lot this morning. She was right. I had woken up with a sore neck from sleeping on the couch and not moving much. It was hard with Susan so close to me last night. I hesitated before answering, needing sleep. "John, if that's all you want." The truth was, the medicine I was on made me less interested in being intimate. I haven't needed to buy any new batteries for a while, if you know what I mean. "That's too bad. Is it going to be like that for you for a long time?" she asked, looking concerned. "I hope not. I miss the times when we were close." She trailed off, her cheeks going red, but continued. "The doctor believes that with some adjustments, I can get back to my old self, but I know it's more complicated for women. Rachel says there's no magic pill like there is for guys. And love is still the best thing for us in the long run? I felt so relaxed lying in your arms last night, but I worry about you since I know how important that is for men," she added. "I feel like I'm not meeting your needs as a woman. Do you even want me now? Just think about yourself right now. Your mental health matters the most for the kids and for me too. Let's go to your room and you can get some rest. I'll be okay." But would I be okay? I wasn't sure. Trusting her was still hard for me, and I knew lying next to her in bed would be a confusing mix of comfort and pain. Now that I was almost fully healed from my injuries and feeling good again, my feelings were pretty strong. We went to the bedroom, and even though we had a big bed, she stayed close to me as we watched a light movie. Soon, I noticed she was breathing evenly, and I looked at her calm face. She looked beautiful and seemed more relaxed than I had seen her in years. Her body felt warm and soft against mine. The next morning, I woke up with her still beside me. When I looked at her, she was smiling. After I took my shower, Susan joined me, humming happily and helping me wash. Finally, she looked at me and asked for a kiss. What could I say? She was charming me, and it was hard to say no. I kissed her softly, but soon she was smiling even more. "Wow," she said. "I think I'm feeling really happy." But we had to think about the kids first, so we quickly rinsed off and got out of the shower. At the beach, she wore a new swimsuit. It was a bit different, and it seemed like it didn't quite fit perfectly. I watched her closely as many people looked at her, but she only had eyes for me. I wanted to spend more time with my kids, especially Kimberly, but I didn't want to leave Susan alone with so many people around. Plus, I had to watch Kimberly, who was getting lessons from 4 boys on how to surf. It turned out to be one of the best days of my life. Not just Susan, but all the kids were cheerful and listened well to me. When I said it was time to head back to the condo to clean up for dinner, everyone agreed without arguing, even Kimberly. She was handling her new friends well and didn't waste any time when her mom called her. I felt proud of my daughter's beauty and her confidence. I also sensed that my kids were proud of me as their dad and glad to be together as a family again. Could I now let my worries about the past stop me from enjoying this? This week was going by quickly and I didn't want it to end. What should I do next? Take it slow, one day at a time. After a nice and quick dinner at one of our favorite seafood places that also had great burgers and chicken fingers, we returned to the condo. We found a nice family movie to watch together. Around 10 p.m., the kids were getting sleepy and went to their rooms. Abby was asleep, so I carried her to her bed and tucked her in, while Susan kissed her goodnight. Without saying much, we both went to our bedroom, with Susan going to the bathroom first. When she stepped out, I noticed she was wearing a nightgown I had never seen before. It looked like it was made of a soft material and reached just above her knees, with slits running up to her waist on both sides. It seemed like she didn't have anything under it. I looked at her, confused, and she turned red. "I wore that bikini to see how you would react," she said. "I didn't expect all the other guys to pay so much attention, but you watching me got me feeling excited. It's been a while since I felt this way. Maybe we can just have a little fun tonight and see what happens. I'm open to anything you want." She added, "You looked really great in that bikini today. I noticed other guys looking at you too, and I could hardly take my eyes off you. And this nightgown you're wearing is something special. You are still such a beautiful woman." She climbed onto the big bed and crawled toward me on her hands and knees. I said, "Let's not rush into anything. Please give me some time." I didn't want to get hurt again, so I just laid back and asked her to lie down next to me. Before I knew it, I fell asleep with her close. It was Saturday, and we were all set for another Cajun family gathering. I had already talked about my plans to rent part of a house for me and the kids while they were in town. That turned into a good conversation. Susan started, "How will you manage with all the kids in your small apartment? It's only 2 bedrooms, right? Who will take care of them while you're working?" I was a bit worried about that, but a friend of mine, she's the sister of one of my old army buddies who now works for me, offered to let me rent half of her house and even help babysit when I needed it. I thought she might make a joke, like my buddy Jack would, but she held back. Instead, she asked, "How well do you know her?" I answered honestly, "Pretty well. We've been going out a bit, dancing and hanging out with friends. It's nice. She comes from a big family that's very friendly. They have monthly gatherings with food, music, and Zydeco dancing. There's one coming up this Saturday if you want to meet her and see the family." I thought about how this could be tricky for Susan. I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. I would like to take the kids, but even that felt risky. A small, casual meeting with Jenny, Carla, and their children might be a better idea. Susan took a moment and then said, "Okay, I think I'd like that. Do you have to go back to work on Monday?" I just nodded. She sighed. "That's too bad. I have a condo booked for another week just in case, but I can cancel it and only pay for 2 days. I was thinking I would just stay here in Mobile all summer. I plan to rent a suite at one of those Marriott extended stay hotels." This surprised me. I had no idea this was her plan all along. Or maybe it wasn't. We had talked about this on Friday at the beach before she really got my attention last night. Now we were in her BMW SUV, driving back to Jenny's house for another all-day party. We got there a little after noon, and the setup was in full swing. Jenny was in charge again. She saw us as we walked up from the car. She greeted me with her usual smile, kissed me on the cheek, and looked over at my family. I turned back and saw that both Kimberly and Susan did not look too happy. I said, "Everyone, this is Jenny, and this is the house I have rented for us while you are here with me. Jenny, this is my ex, Susan, my oldest daughter, Kimberly, my son, Joey, and Abby." Jenny smiled warmly and said, "Welcome. Please have a good time today. My son Joey is around here somewhere. I'll find him soon. Susan, would you like to help us set up a bit? I'll introduce you to my cousin Carla and the other women as they arrive." Just then, Frenchie and Gigi walked up, and I introduced everyone again. JJ and even Kimberly seemed a little surprised by Gigi's beauty and her friendly voice. Gigi walked to the kitchen area with Jenny and Susan, and to my surprise, Kimberly decided to go with them. I saw the girls laughing about something before they entered the house. Kimberly looked back at me with a big smile, and I realized I was probably the reason for their happiness, but it didn't bother me at all. I grabbed a drink, mostly lemonade for me today. About then, Joey came running up and said, "Hi, John. Mom sent me to make friends with your kids." Soon, he and JJ went off to do their boy things. I watched them leave, and Ben said, "Don't worry, Johnny. We'll watch the kids here, okay?" Then Carla's daughter, Kaylee, came up to meet Parker and Abby, and they wandered off to meet some of Kelly's cousins. About an hour later, we all gathered again for lunch. Susan looked nice and seemed comfortable. Everyone was having a good time. Jenny actually sat next to Susan instead of me. It was like the women were on one side of the long table and the men were on the other, but Abby wanted to sit next to me. The music started around 3, and some of the kids began to dance. Slowly, more adults joined them on the dance floor. By 5, we all came back together for a sit-down dinner, but the meal was shorter for the kids who were having so much fun. They could hardly sit long enough to eat. Kimberly spent time with some of her younger teen cousins and was having a good time. One of the girls showed her a simple dance move, and she ended up dancing with a few teen boys, too. After the girls, Gigi and Francie, sang a song, Gigi pulled me to dance. When we got back to our table, I saw Susan looking at me with a thoughtful expression. I walked over to her, held out my hand, and said, "Come on, we can do this." She smiled a little and stood up, though she looked a bit nervous. It had been a while since we had danced together, and I wondered how her medication might be affecting her. I remembered a dance trick from my earlier days. I held her close and said, "Just follow my lead," and she did just that. Good dancers help each other like this. It eases the worry about the music or the steps. Just focus on moving with your partner. And that's exactly what she did. Soon I could let her spin a bit, and before long she was dancing with Ben and some other boys too. I danced with Jenny, Frankie, Carly, and even Kimberly, who seemed to enjoy it. I felt proud of how graceful Susan was. We planned to head back after dinner, but it seemed like everyone wanted to stay longer. With about an hour's drive ahead of us, I started gathering everyone at around 7, and we finally got in the car by 8:30. In just 15 minutes, 3 kids were asleep, while Kimberly was smiling and humming to herself. Susan looked relaxed and happy as she settled into bed that night. She said everyone had been so kind that day. I agreed, saying they really were nice people. I talked a lot with Jenny. It seemed she liked Susan, too. I said, "I like her, but just as a friend for now." Susan whispered back, "Well, Jenny said I'd be welcome to stay with my family, too, as long as you and the kids are around. What do you think about that?" To be honest, it made me a bit nervous, just like Susan's strong personality sometimes did. But I thought about it. Life with Susan was going to be anything but boring. I wasn't sure how I felt. "Let me think about it for a few days while we relax at the beach, and I'll let you know," I said. "Sure, honey. I need to get the kids settled tomorrow," she replied. "We'll take things as they come. Everything feels uncertain right now, one day at a time." Susan seemed a bit down after our talk, so we cuddled for a while. Today had likely been stressful for her. They were all nice people, but they were still new to her. Many of my friends knew about my life that was separate from her and our kids. Now let's see things from Susan's view. John and I didn't share a special moment last night, and I felt sad. Jenny was definitely on my mind. It wasn't just that she was pretty. She was also very kind and sensible. Her kindness made me feel like I couldn't measure up. I wanted John back, but I loved him enough to wish for his happiness and our kids' happiness too. I figured I might have to come last in all of this if that made everyone else happy. I really wanted to talk to Rachel, Dr. Horowitz, about everything before deciding to move in with Jenny. This was the main reason I held off, especially since John didn't show any affection towards me last night. Everyone felt a bit quiet at breakfast the next morning. The kids realized I wouldn't be joining them that day, and it was tough for all of us. JJ couldn't stop talking about his new friend, Joey. Parker liked Kaylee, and so did Abby. This worried me. I almost made plans to go with them right then, but I tried to think rationally and not let my fear take over. I knew how badly that could end, and Rachel and I were working on staying calm and practicing patience. So I held it together and helped the kids pack their things into John's car. I hugged each of them tightly and gave John a good kiss. He promised to call me later. Then they were off. I went back inside the condo and shed a few tears. I felt low, but it was a normal kind of low, not overwhelming. The day was bright and nice, so I decided to go to the beach and relax a bit. There weren't many people there, and I knew there would be even fewer the next day. Sunday was when many visitors would leave. That's when I met a guy named Sam O'Donnell. He said he had walked past me a few times. At first I thought he was looking at me, but he wasn't obvious about it. He wore a straw cowboy hat and red swim trunks like what lifeguards wear. Eventually, he came up and started talking to me. He seemed young, maybe in his mid-20s, and kind of looked like a younger Brad Pitt. He was about 5'9" and had a cute smile. I couldn't help but laugh. He seemed really friendly. He mentioned that he came from a wealthy family in Alabama, and his dad was a senator planning to run for lieutenant governor. He talked about it lightly, saying he didn't like his family much and was bored with his rich friends. He was just at the beach for a break. I listened closely, taking it all in. I met him for dinner that night at the new seafood restaurant we all liked. The meal was nice, and it felt good not to eat alone. I had one glass of wine, then I went back to my condo. I watched a little TV while waiting for John to call. He called around 9 and said everything went well. He mentioned he was tired after taking care of 4 kids by himself. Luckily, Kimberly helped out a lot, and JJ had Joey to play with, while Parker had Kaylee. It all worked out. John ordered pizza for everyone, which was great because Jenny and Carlo were worn out from the party they had the day before. We had a nice chat, ending with wishes for a good day at the beach and a good day at work. There was still nothing certain planned. The next day, I talked to Rachel for about 15 minutes. We set up a meeting for an hour tomorrow at 10 a.m. I knew I had to figure something out tomorrow, either move into Jenny's or get a longer stay somewhere. I went back to the beach around 1 p.m., and soon Sam came over to chat again. He was funny and easy to be around. He had many amusing stories about his friends and family. They were not always kind stories, but he told them in a way that made me laugh. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. We met for dinner again around 7 at a little place he picked. I let him come to get me at the condo. It felt like he was a good friend. The restaurant was calm and the food was really good. I had 2 glasses of wine during dinner, and then Sam ordered dessert that we shared, along with a glass of brandy for both of us. I probably shouldn't have had the brandy, but I felt relaxed after a day in the sun, so I enjoyed it. After that, Sam showed me something and asked if I minded if he tried it. I said no without really thinking. He then offered me one with a smile. I was already feeling a bit tipsy from the wine and brandy, so I just smiled back and took it without a second thought. Looking back, that wasn't the best choice. As we were leaving the restaurant, Sam touched me, and I suddenly felt excited and alive, just like I hadn't in a while. We were getting close when I told him I wanted to go home, but he insisted we stay a little longer, and that surprised me. He was more demanding than I expected. After that moment, he drove me home, then watched as I stumbled to my condo. As soon as I unlocked the door, he was right there behind me. He pushed me inside and then came at me aggressively. I couldn't resist because of what the drug had done to me, but I still didn't like what was happening and worried about how it would affect my life with John. When he finally left, I was left crumpled on the floor. I thought about calling the police, but I knew that would be like telling John I had willingly spent time with a stranger, gotten drunk, taken drugs, and then faced harm. He wouldn't believe me. The police wouldn't either. I really needed help, and the only person I could think of was Rachel. After a long, hot shower, I took some pain relievers and crawled into bed, crying. I cried myself to sleep and woke up feeling awful. My head hurt, my body ached, and I felt the effects of the drugs, like happiness was lost to me forever. As one person said, "Oh no." I hoped I wouldn't have to go to rehab again. I called Rachel on her emergency number, and she answered right away. "Susan, what's wrong?" I started crying again and tried to explain everything. Eventually, I told her most of it. She said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry this happened to you. You need to go to the emergency room right away and get checked out. Please take a taxi. Have the doctor at the ER call me as soon as you arrive. Once I speak to him, we can figure things out together. I don't think you will need rehab, but this is a setback, and we both know it. Have you talked to John much while you were there?" That made me cry again, but I managed to say, "Yes, things were going well until this. I wanted to talk to her about it sooner." "Okay, Susan, can you give me his phone number? I might want to talk to him." I shared the number with her. She insisted I call a taxi right away and not trying to drive myself. "If you can't get a taxi, just call 911 for an ambulance," she urged. So, I did just that. In 1873, 10 years after the Battle of Gettysburg, Congress decided to make a painting of that important moment in the Civil War to hang in the foyer of the Capitol building. It was to be a big painting, 6 feet by 10 feet, showing the strength and victory of the Union over the Confederates. The artist chosen for this was a nephew of a senator from Maryland, and he was a decent painter starting to make a name for himself. Jonathan Winstead spent the next 2 years on this project. He visited the battlefield and spoke to many people who had witnessed the event. The battle itself lasted 3 days and involved almost 200,000 soldiers, with about 46,000 casualties on both sides, including those killed, wounded, or captured. It had the most casualties of any single battle in the entire war. Jonathan met many of the officers who had survived on both sides of the battle. He made sketches of them for a painting he was creating. He also spoke with the families of some men who had been killed. He copied old portraits and even a few photographs of those officers who had not been in combat. After much hard work, he finished a beautiful painting. It showed the end of Pickett's charge, a key moment for the Confederacy. A small group of Confederate soldiers broke through the Union line at Cemetery Ridge just before Union reinforcements arrived and pushed them back. Pickett's division lost many men, far more than the usual number for any battle. The term decimated means losing 1 out of every 10 soldiers, a punishment for troops that ran away during a fight. The painting accurately showed how many soldiers were lost in the battle. On average, losing armies typically lost about 10% of their forces. This was a lesson that not fighting was never an option. Pickett's division was nearly destroyed and could not fight effectively afterward. Sadly for Jonathan Winstead, even with the talent and detail in his painting, the leaders in Congress disliked it. They felt it didn't show the Union victory clearly enough and refused to accept it or pay him for his work. He had spent 2 years only to cover his expenses. In the end, he did find a buyer, a kind Southern man who wasn't bothered by the sad memories related to Gettysburg. The painting was passed down in Andrew Butler's family for many years. Now it hung in the law offices of Gathers, Brindle, Weatherby, and Butler, located in downtown Mobile. This area was not the best neighborhood. The office was in an old warehouse near the docks, a building that once had large, rounded windows, now all bricked up. The office felt more like an art gallery, with the Battle of Gettysburg painting as its main piece. The U.S. Congress even offered to buy the painting back, asking for the owner to name a price. However, George Butler, the owner, refused to sell. His wealth and connections kept him safe from any government pressure. His law firm was one of the richest in Alabama and the entire Old South. He had lawyers licensed in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, as well as Alabama and Washington, D.C. His firm worked on Southern federal spending issues, including projects like Lytton Shipbuilding in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Art heist. This private art museum wasn't a secret to the rich clients who visited it regularly. They often came to admire the beautiful paintings, some sculptures, and antique Ming vases. However, it wasn't advertised to the public, and most people wouldn't know what lay behind the plain red brick walls. The building had security cameras at all 4 corners and only 2 entrances, a main door at the front and a larger loading door at the back. Both doors were made of steel and had strong frames. At night, 2 armed guards were inside, while 2 cars patrolled outside. The art inside was worth an astonishing $80 million, making the extra security seem necessary. During the day, only 1 guard was on duty, but each partner in the business was allowed to carry a gun, kept in their desks. They all knew how to handle firearms, having learned from years of hunting. This likely led to a bold plan for a daytime robbery. Someone must have shared inside information. A man and woman entered, both dressed sharply for business. The woman quickly overwhelmed the receptionist before she could raise the alarm. The man moved towards the guard room while holding a weapon. The guard was focused on the cameras, had dismissed the couple's entrance, and missed the woman's quick action. That was a mistake he wouldn't live to regret. The man entered the guard room and shot him before he could react. The guard died instantly. Even a vest wouldn't have helped against that weapon, which was very powerful. The man then activated his communication device, signaling for 3 more men to enter through the front door while a delivery truck approached the back alley. The plan was to quietly gather everyone into a conference room, take away their cell phones, and lock them inside while they loaded selected art pieces into the truck. The main target was a valuable item, but the inside information was not complete. George Butler was present that day as the only partner in the office, monitoring the security cameras with his small tablet, which switched between views every 2 seconds. He saw the receptionist being helped inside by a big man, and he quickly pressed his alarm button and called 911 from his phone. After noticing 3 big men and a woman enter, all carrying guns, he wisely chose not to bring out his own weapon. Instead, he described what he saw to the 9 men from the police. One officer put down his phone but kept it on. Just moments later, his door flew open. He slowly raised his hands as one man signaled for him to stand up, and he was guided into the largest conference room. He actually hoped to get his staff safely locked in there before the police arrived and before any confusion began. Meanwhile, it was Monday, and I was back to work after a fun but tiring week of vacation. I was still trying to understand Susan. We had started to talk again, and she seemed less upset, but now she seemed stranger than ever. What she told me and how she acted made me think a lot. The most important thought in my mind was how great my kids truly were. I had taken them for granted before Susan's breakdown, and I had felt sad when they all seemed to turn against me. But after this last week, I appreciated them more than ever, and couldn't bear the thought of being away from them for too long. As for Susan, I wasn't sure about her. I could probably never fully trust her like I did before. The truth was, I had never felt that intense kind of love for her, even though she said she had always felt it for me. Should I feel bad about that? I loved her in my own way, or else I wouldn't have married her. I had always been loyal, even if I faced temptations. Wearing a uniform attracts attention from many, and I had received my fair share of offers but always said no. Maybe there was a chance for a closer relationship with Susan, where I pretended to feel love while keeping myself safe. Wouldn't that make everyone happy, especially the kids? Maybe that extreme kind of love isn't all it's cracked up to be. I was just trying to keep an open mind. As I thought about things day by day, Monday felt quite normal. I got back to my routine and not much was happening. I didn't even see most of my team, as they were either on their vacations or out on patrol. Our meeting was not set until Wednesday at 7 a.m. I had already learned that from May on, running early in the morning was the best idea. The summer heat in Mobile rarely went above 92 degrees Fahrenheit, but the humidity almost never dropped below 90%, and that combination was really tough. I wasn't used to it yet. Frenchie, Karen, and a few others were, but I thought it was best to exercise outside only in the early morning. That night, I went home a bit early because I wanted to see how the kids were doing. They all seemed really happy, which surprised me. They had done many activities that weren't just watching TV or playing video games. They had spent another full day outside. Jenny and Carla made a great dinner for everyone, and we all stayed busy chatting. Kimberly was amazing. She moved easily between talking with us adults and the kids, including Joey and Kelly, who were still outside playing when it got dark. Before I knew it, it was 10 o'clock, and everyone was getting ready for bed. I hadn't called Susan, and she hadn't called me either, but I didn't think much about it. Maybe she was already asleep, I thought as my head hit the pillow. I had an early day ahead of me because I now had about a 30-minute drive to my station. Tuesday morning was when everything changed. Frenchie and Jill Renee were in the squad room with me, working on important paperwork and staying on call. Then we got a 911 call from a private security company called Silent Alarm. The 3 of us headed out in the T-Mobile command center. I called all our other team members who weren't busy to meet us a block over from the law office. There was a report of a robbery in progress. On the way over, I heard the call. Shots fired, officer down, and paramedics were on their way. I felt a chill. That's not something any officer wants to hear. I felt even worse knowing Karen Rigby was already there. I was pretty sure she was patrolling that area and was one of the first to respond to the call, but I hadn't spoken to her yet. When we arrived and parked, I asked Joe to gather everyone else while Frenchie and I walked over to check the scene. It seemed quiet, with many flashing lights. Patrol cars were there, but no officers had gone inside yet. I hoped the front door was open, but we could see the interior door beyond. The reception area was closed. I asked the uniformed sergeant if anyone was missing and who made the shots fired call. As I feared, he replied that Karen Rigby and a new officer, Jim Bast, were first on the scene. Karen made the call from her radio and then went silent. I thought to myself that Karen might have rushed in instead of waiting for backup. Still, I believed she had a good reason for it. Now, I was the highest-ranking officer on the scene, and usually wouldn't make the choice to go in alone, but I was really worried about Karen and the quietness around us. I used my special radio to call Joe. "How many officers are here?" I asked. "Just Alan, Fred, and me. We're all ready to go," he replied. I could tell he was excited and ready to move, but I hoped no one was too eager. It seemed quiet. "We need to go in now. Bring everything we can." I quietly asked Frenchie for his thoughts. "No windows. We haven't heard anything. We should at least try to see inside with a camera. I think Joe had that and most of our tools." We carefully entered the reception area and slipped the camera under the door. 2 police officers were on the floor, blocking our view. "This is not good," I said. "We are going in strong, just like we practiced with 5 of us. Frenchie, what do you think?" "As long as I go in first, I'm good, boss." I wanted to lead, but that was not my role anymore. Frenchie was trained for that. He must have seen how eager I was. I wanted to go first, but he was right. "All right, I will go second, then Joe out, and Fred, remember your spots and stay calm. Just like a drill. We're ready when you are, Frenchie. Fred, you open the door." "Right." Fred would open the door and be the last one in. Frenchie crouched down with his rifle pointed down, safety off, and his finger ready on the guard. I was in the same position. He would check ahead and to the right. I would check to the left, right behind him. He would focus on what was ahead while Joe covered his right as we moved in behind Frenchie. It went as planned. The bad guys were already gone. Karen and Jim were badly hurt. It looked like they had been hit with machine gun bullets, and at least one had armor-piercing rounds. But they were both alive, at least for now. I felt like crying when I saw Karen and thought about what might happen if she survived. Yet I prayed she wouldn't die. I was getting angry, wondering what was going on. Why so much firepower for a lawyer's office? Homicide and robbery were now on my mind. I wanted to catch whoever had killed at least one person in this robbery, and possibly 2 police officers too. I kept my team close, ready to look out for anything in the next 2 hours. But it would depend on luck, since I didn't think these professionals would make any mistakes. George Butler kept saying sorry. He was sure he had warned the robbers about the cops coming, since he had his team flip the conference table and hide behind it. Once they were locked in that room, visible through the glass wall, 2 robbers had set up to ambush any first responders that arrived before they finished. Karen and Jim didn't have a chance, and I still didn't understand why they decided to go in before backup arrived. Butler also told us about the value of the items taken. They were worth at least $50 million to someone who wanted them. But this wasn't cash or gold or jewelry. Someone very rich wanted 1 or more of those paintings, and maybe another person found out and decided to sell the painting instead. Butler promised us he wasn't going to give up that Gettysburg painting, and everything left was still worth between $30 and $40 million. I didn't really dislike very rich people or their strange habits until their actions harmed others. Like now. After a couple of hours, I told everyone to go back to their regular jobs. I sent Joe back to the office, and Frenchie and I drove to the hospital in separate cars to check on Karen and her family, and probably her fiancé too. When my phone rang, it was a number from the St. Louis area I didn't recognize. "Hello? John Thornton?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, that's me. Hi, this is Rachel Horowitz calling. I don't know if Susan mentioned me, but I'm her psychiatrist right now." "Oh, Dr. Rachel, yes, she talked about you." "Okay, this is hard for me because of patient privacy, but I have to make a judgment without actually meeting you. Susan always speaks highly of you." "Please, doctor. I have a lot happening right now at work, and I need you to get to the point." "Okay, Mr. Thornton, here it is. Susan had a rough night, but I want you to know she didn't think of it as a date. She only wanted to have dinner with a new friend she met at the beach. Some drugs were involved. She's really upset and was scared to tell the police because she thought you might find out and think badly of her. This morning I had to persuade her to get medical help, and I've talked to the doctor at the ER and spent a couple of hours with her. The ER has started a report about what happened, but Susan is still afraid to talk to the police. We both know the person might get away with it. Right now, Susan needs to be with her family and not alone. Is there anything you can do about it? I felt angry about all this, and the timing was terrible. I kept wondering, was Susan going back to her old ways? How could I trust what she said? Doctor, she can come stay with me and her kids right away. We already talked about it, but she has been hesitant. She wants to spend a few more days at the beach before deciding. You probably know how I feel. With everything we've been through, I have many questions swirling in my mind. I understand, Mr. Thornton. It would be good for Susan to be with her family, but please be gentle with her. She's feeling very shaken up and may need some medicine to help her relax for about a week. I hope she can stop taking it soon. I'll also make sure I'm available to talk to her every day for the next few days. Can she drive? She probably can, but I wouldn't suggest it. Anyway, you could go and pick her up. Sure, I can arrange that, but she has to really want to come stay with us. I'll give her a call. I will have to tell her we spoke, that's fine. By the way, do you have any details about the man involved? Yes. Susan mentioned he said his name is Sam O'Donnell. He claims to be the son of a senator from Alabama and comes from a wealthy family. He was just vacationing alone in Gulf Shores. That's about all she knows. All right, I'll start looking into this guy through the Orange County Police. I guess I should call Susan now. Is there anything else? Nothing I can think of, just thank you. Susan is my patient, but I see her as a friend too, and I really care about her. It's upsetting that this setback happened, but unfortunately, this kind of thing can happen with her condition. It is a medical condition. Please keep that in mind. I will. Thanks for calling me. Bye. Goodbye, John. I was still about 10 minutes from the hospital and wanted to think it over, but I was worried that if I delayed calling Susan, I might not want to call her later. I still had feelings for Susan, and last week showed that clearly. It also meant she could still hurt me, and I hated feeling scared and weak about it. Never mind. Hello? She said in a soft, frightened voice. Susan, I just spoke with Dr. Rachel. She told me what happened to you. Are you okay? I tried my best to sound friendly. I guess so, John. Oh, I'm so sorry this happened. I heard her start to cry a little. Susan, you don't need to apologize to me. Please try to stop crying and let's get you over here. Where are you now? I'm back at my condo. The door's locked, but I feel a little scared. I'll come over and get you, but things are pretty tense here right now. 2 officers, Karen Rigby and another, were shot this morning and I'm heading to the hospital. Let me call Jenny and see if we can arrange to get you here as soon as possible, okay? Just hang in there and call me back if you need anything. Also, call 911 if you see anything strange outside your condo. Promise me, okay? Yes, John, I will do that. I hate being such a bother. I feel no good. You're good enough, Susan. You're a great mother to 4 wonderful kids. You are also good enough to be my wife. Don't forget that. All right, let me call Jenny and see what we can figure out. Just take care of yourself, okay? Bye, John. Thanks. Now I call Jenny. John, are you okay? Is Frenchie okay? It's all over the news. I realized I hadn't thought about how my call might worry her. I almost smiled. But this is always serious for police and their families. We're okay, Jenny. If you haven't heard, Karen Rigby and rookie officer Jim Best were shot this morning and are in the hospital. Frenchie and I are on our way there. The bad guys got away, but this was a special kind of robbery, not your usual gang stuff. Don't worry. But I was scared for a moment. Are your kids okay? What's going on? I need a favor, a big one. It's about Susan. She wants to move in with us, but she was attacked last night and is really shaken up. I need to get her over here. Oh no, that's terrible. Do you want me to pick her up? Yes, that would really help. If you could have someone come with you to drive her car back, that would be great, but it's not a must. I can manage that next weekend with Frenchie. Maybe Gigi can come too. Carla can watch all the kids. Usually we just load them all up and go, but Susan might need some quiet time or to talk with just me. I've been there once and know how hard it can be. John, I hate to hear that. I hope justice is served. It has been, Jenny. Maybe something good can come from this. If I can help Susan a little, that would mean a lot. And please don't blame the victim in this situation. Right, John? I heard a firm tone in her voice, so I made sure to respond the right way. Not at all, Jenny. Just keep me updated and let me know how she's doing. You know how much I care about you, right? I think so, John. But I also know how many lives you touch and help. Everything will be okay if we just take it one day at a time. Yeah, thanks again, Jenny. I can't tell you how much this means to me. Just let me know if there's any problem. Here is Susan's cell number. Please call her once you've sorted everything out. I really liked Jenny. She was not only beautiful, but also caring and sensible. She seemed strong, both physically and mentally. We just seemed to get along well, and neither of us seemed too eager to rush into things. Still, Susan was the mother of my kids. I felt attracted to her and wanted to protect her. Maybe she felt the same way about me. But I knew that many women, including Susan, were good at pretending to love someone. She had just shared with me how she had faked her feelings for Jack. I was definitely in a mode of being careful and checking things out with Susan. I planned to look into this Sam O'Donnell guy. Okay, maybe he was not a nice person. Next, I called Frenchie to get things moving before I went into the hospital. Hey, do you know anyone from the Orange County Police Department? Sure. My uncle has worked there for almost 20 years. What's up? This is a bit personal. I need some info. Not official, about a guy named Sam O'Donnell. I'm looking for anything about him that could be related to violence or wrongdoing. I think he might be the son of some Alabama state senator. Can you get that going quietly? I'll call him right before I go into the hospital. Thanks, Frenchie. I'll let you explain later. By the way, Gigi called. She's going to Gulf Shores with Jenny to pick up Susan. I think this might be connected. Yes, sadly. Don't worry. Whatever it is, we'll take care of it. See you soon. Jenny and Gigi will be praying for Karen and Jim and Susan the whole way there. Gigi wanted me to tell you that whenever I saw you. I couldn't help but think about how I had done nothing to deserve such kind friends. Maybe they were just wonderful people, and that kindness couldn't be earned. I thought of the time Susan left me and how much I felt I didn't deserve that pain. I had shown Susan love and loyalty for so long. So how could she hurt me like that? But last week, she had said she loved me since she was 14, a time when I hadn't earned her love. I needed to think this through, but I was almost at the surgery waiting room. I had to focus on Karen and Jim for now. When I got there, I saw many unfamiliar faces. Most were civilians, but I also spotted some police officers I recognized but couldn't name yet. My boss was there and told me that Karen was still in surgery, but Jim didn't survive. That explained the sad faces and crying around me. Jim was only 23, just starting his career. Later, as I learned more, I wondered if he had insisted on going in right away, even though Karen wanted to wait. She had gone in with him to help. What I knew about Karen felt mostly right, but I kept those thoughts to myself for now, maybe forever, unless Karen got better and we had to talk it all out. Right now, all I felt was worry and sadness. I had been to too many police funerals already in my short career. Frenchie walked in and waved at me, but quickly went over to talk to a police officer I recognized. He was Karen's fiancé. I had met him once at a monthly gathering. Frenchie hugged him, and I noticed tears in both their eyes. I hadn't prayed in a long time, but I had prayed more than a few times when I was in Iraq, and now I silently asked for help. Please keep Karen safe, and spare her family this pain. I needed help too. At this point, it felt like it couldn't hurt, and I didn't know what else to do. Everything was now in the hands of the doctors and nurses. The hours dragged on. Finally, around 7 p.m., the surgeon came out to speak with Karen's family. She was alive but in critical condition and would be in the ICU for a while. She was alive, and I saw a few faint smiles of relief. Jenny had already called to let me know that Susan was at the house and asleep in my bed. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but it made me feel a little small to worry. I called Jenny back and shared the good news about Karen. I told her that Frankie and I were coming over since Gigi was still there too. She said they were keeping the leftovers warm for us. I was tired from the emotional stress of the day. My adrenaline had kicked in when we thought we were walking into a dangerous situation, and worrying about Karen, Jim, and Susan didn't help. I also received a call from a St. Louis number in the afternoon, around 4 p.m. It was from a friend in the district attorney's office. Jack Carter was out of the minimum security prison and was on parole now. A parole officer would keep an eye on him for another 6 months. Since there had been threats made against me, I figured Jack was behind them. This call was a heads up. If Susan had given her contact information to the DA, they would have called her too, but I hoped she hadn't. I would tell Susan about this. It might not mean anything, and Jack might have learned his lesson. Maybe. As for Susan, Tuesday morning felt heavy with sadness, even after the ER visit and an hour talking with Dr. Rachel. My mind was racing. Even though I had taken a calming medication, I didn't understand why that nice young man, Sam O'Donnell, did what he did to me. It must have been my fault somehow. I still felt so confused that I just couldn't see things clearly. I didn't want anything with him. I really didn't think I was sending him those kinds of signals at all. Our talks were never flirtatious. It wasn't like the intense feelings I had for Jack. I used to think that taking ecstasy would lift my growing sadness. Last year, I didn't even want to take it, but it felt like a habit I couldn't control. I must have acted out quite wildly, and that's why Sam did what he did. I didn't deserve John, that was clear. I didn't feel worthy of my kids either, but I still longed for John and my family. Whenever I thought deeply about it, I would just start crying. John called and didn't see Matt. I held on to his voice like it was a lifeline, but it barely sank in when he said that Karen Rigby, one of his team members and a nice young woman I had met at a party, had been hurt. After the call, I worried if John was in danger too. I would have really broken down if it weren't for the Valium calming me down. Then Jenny called and said she was on her way to get me. I felt sad and relieved at the same time. My feelings for Jenny were all mixed up. I was so jealous of her because I felt deep down that she might be better for John than I was, even for my kids. Yet I wanted John for myself. I also thought Jenny was a good person and I couldn't genuinely dislike her. So I waited for Jenny while hurriedly packing my things, so much for a nice, relaxing beach trip. Soon, Jenny and Gigi arrived. I think I dozed off for a bit. I was also taking strong ibuprofen for my aches and bruises. I wasn't sure if Sam had been careful, so I had to take an antibiotic for 7 days just to be safe. I was also told not to get too close with anyone for the next 2 weeks until everything was clear. But honestly, I didn't think anything would happen anyway. Just last week, I felt a small spark of desire for John. I had loved the closeness we shared, even if my feelings weren't always met. I wanted to take care of John and not anyone else. Jenny and Gigi embraced me like loving sisters, more so than my own sister Janice ever did. I thought about resting during the hour-long ride back, but I overheard Jenny and Gigi talking about their own close calls on the phone. Gigi was driving my car while I was in a bit of a daze. I mumbled that I didn't understand what I did to make Sam act that way. Jenny told Gigi to call back later and turned to me saying, "Honey, you didn't do anything wrong. It's not your fault. Some men just treat women badly." I believed her. I was married to a guy once, back when we were dating and just starting our life together. He seemed like the sweetest person ever. I thought he was also very handsome. He was 6 feet tall, had blue eyes, dirty blonde hair, a strong chin, and a bright smile with dimples. But it turned out to be a show. Inside, he was not a good person, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't hide it for long. In the end, he hurt me. He attacked me more than once. If he hadn't just vanished from my life, I might have done something terrible to him. Frenchie figured it out after a while. What I really want is to get my marriage back with John. You should know I'm not interested in dating or being with anyone else, that's it. There was this kid, Sam, who seemed really nice at first, but then he wasn't. It just doesn't feel fair. I keep thinking, why me? Jenny was quiet for a moment. She said, "John told me a bit about you and what you're going through. You're seeing a therapist, right? Maybe that's who you should talk to for clearer answers. However, I can share my thoughts. It's like good news and bad news. The good news is you're a beautiful woman and attract good men like John." I scoffed at that. "Yeah, only when I'm in a good place." She continued, "The bad news is you're a beautiful woman and can also attract the wrong men like Sam. The worst ones are going to really go after you. I think that's what Sam is all about and what happened between you two. I wish I could say to just forget about Sam, but you probably need to remember this and learn from it. It's a tough lesson, but that's just how life is sometimes, right?" The next 2 weeks felt like a blur. Jenny was so nice that if she ended up with John, I'd still care for her. Right now, I took my medicine, and I got to sleep next to John each night. He listened to my tears and just held me close. After the first week, I stopped taking the Valium, and I didn't need to talk with Rachel every day either. I told my kids I had a bad flu, and they were really understanding. I loved them more every day, and it felt genuine this time, not like the pretending I had to do last year. On Tuesday of that second week, I received a call from my mom, Edith. She said she missed me and the kids a lot and asked when I would be back in St. Louis. I told her, "Mom, I've decided to stay here at least until the kids have their time with their dad. Right now, I'm staying with them." She replied, "Oh, that's good to hear, honey. Are you and John getting back together? Is that what you want?" I said, "Yes, that's what I want, but I'm not sure if it will happen. I can't blame him after everything I've done and keep doing." "What do you mean by keep doing?" she asked. I explained, "I just made another mistake. I misjudged someone and it ended up badly. But that's behind us now, and I don't want to discuss it." Of course, that was like waving a red cloth in front of a bull. My mom kept asking me for the details, but I wouldn't share. Finally, she said, "I have some good news for you. Jack Carter came by to see me, and he is very sorry about what happened." She said he had received some good advice and understood his mistake now. He just wanted to let you know he didn't even ask where you were. Isn't that great? Yeah, that's wonderful, but I really wish you wouldn't talk to him anymore. I realize it might sound strange for me to call someone else strange and worry like this, but that's how I feel about Jack. I'd just rather not hear anything more about him, ever. Okay, honey, I understand. Just don't think about him. What Mom didn't tell me was that she had given Jack my new phone number. He managed to get it from her just to call her one time and apologize after I finally stopped needing any calming pills one Saturday night. All of us adults went out that night. Me, John, Frenchie, Gigi, and Jenny, while Carla had a date. Really? A couple of funny musician guys who happened to be twins. We had dinner at a Creole restaurant that had a pretty big dance floor and a nice Zydeco band. We danced a lot and laughed at the twins' funny acts. For the first time in almost 3 years, I was feeling normal, just happy. John had one beer, and I didn't drink any alcohol, just water and sweet tea. The next day was Sunday, and John, the kids, and I spent the whole day together. We rented a pontoon boat and cruised around Mobile Bay, stopping now and then so the kids could play in the water. The boat rental included a paddleboard, which was really fun, but harder to stay on and paddle than it looked. By the time we got home after another meal out, everyone felt pleasantly tired. Later that night, I woke up from a strong dream that took me back to my college days. I had just been dreaming about that moment when everything changed. I remembered being close with John so vividly that it woke me up. Dr. Rachel had said my body would eventually adjust to the medication and I would feel more like myself again, and I guess that day had come. Meanwhile, on a Monday, 2 weeks after that robbery at the law office, I received an unexpected call. I was in a good mood, so much so that I noticed people looking at me. What I wanted to ask them was beyond surprising. It was just part of our new normal bedtime routine. I held her, and she wasn't crying anymore, and we were both so tired from our fun day on the bay that we fell asleep quickly. She woke me up in the middle of the night in a really nice way, and afterward, I fell back asleep feeling good. I was in a good mood when George Butler called me. He wanted me to come to his office to talk about the robbery. I asked if I should bring the main detectives for homicide and robbery. He said no, just me for now. He mentioned it was also a personal matter and that he had some video and reports to discuss. "Is now a good time for you?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "We'll be waiting for you." I found it interesting and wondered what the personal matter could be. The last couple of weeks had gone by quickly. Karen was still alive, which was a relief, and she had left the ICU after 8 days. She had lost her spleen, which almost took her life. She suffered from severe blood loss and shock. One of her lungs was punctured and her collarbone was broken. That collarbone injury was not life-threatening, but it would hurt the most and take time to heal. Someone from our team checked in on her every day. Her fiancé was with her every night. He seemed like a good guy, and I hoped things worked out for them. But police officers marrying other police officers can be tricky. Actually, marrying anyone in this job is risky. Still, maybe love could find a way. Susan and I were still sharing the same bed and room, but we had not been very close until last night. Susan had cried some nights during that first week, and I comforted her. But now she wasn't crying and was falling asleep faster every night, and I was too. Holding her was peaceful for me, but I found it hard to sleep until she did. The kids seemed to be doing well, happy that their mom was with them. I was also coming home every night at a good time. I was trying hard to keep my extra hours down and let my excellent team help more. Jenny told me Susan was really trying to stay normal for the kids, and she was doing a great job. Susan had taken Valium every day the first week, but Jenny thought she had mostly stopped that now. Abby still came to snuggle in our bed at night about half the time. Susan had been talking to Dr. Rachel every day that first week, but now it was just a scheduled hour on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I had also spoken to Dr. Rachel a few times about Susan and how I was managing. The last time we talked, she mentioned she might attend a conference in New Orleans in about 3 weeks, and maybe we could all meet somewhere halfway for an afternoon. New Orleans was only a 2-hour drive from Mobile, and Biloxi or Gulfport was about halfway. They had some nice hotels and casinos there. After what happened last night, I found myself thinking about spending a night with Susan at a nice hotel. The news from the police in Orange County and Baldwin County about Gulf Shores was quite intriguing. Both police departments were worried about a man named Sam O'Donnell. Several women had complained about him, claiming that he had put them in uncomfortable situations. It looked like Sam had a pattern of bothering married women, but he had never been arrested. Most complaints ended up being stories with no clear proof. Many of the women dropped their claims quickly, and none decided to pursue them further. I was still trying to figure out how to deal with Sam. My friends Frenchie and Jenny had strong opinions about him, often joking about swamps and alligators. Jenny was completely sure that Susan was in the right. But as a police officer, I always felt unsure when only hearing one side of a story. My past with Susan made it hard for me to trust her completely. I felt somewhat relieved to learn about Sam's history because it matched what Susan had told me. He was beginning to look like a real threat. It only took about 15 minutes to drive from my office to Butler's, and I was welcomed right away. George introduced me to Kevin Sandberg, the head of security and investigations. I had already known that the guard who was killed that day was not just any guard, he was a former military employee. After some small talk, we got straight to the point. George spoke up first. He wanted his paintings back. He had put a lot of effort into finding out what had happened to them. The paintings were quite valuable, appealing to wealthy art collectors. George thought it was possible that someone wealthy might be interested in them, especially a collector focused on American art. However, he didn't believe an international collector was involved. There were still too many valuable works hidden by collectors from Europe. So he had asked Kevin and his team to focus on local individuals, particularly those from the South, who might have the money and interest to support this theft or know someone who could. "What do you know about the O'Donnell family in Alabama?" he asked me. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. I usually stay calm, but this caught me off guard. "You've heard the name before," I admitted. George suggested we go over the video recordings of the robbery again. I remembered that I had already seen them earlier that day. We replayed the 4 minutes of footage on the large TV in his office, which was stylishly covered by a valuable painting when not in use. The robbery itself only took 6 minutes, and the shooting of Karen and Jim happened in the last 30 seconds. If they had just waited 30 seconds longer, they might not have been shot, or maybe they still would have been, as the plane truck drove away with 10 paintings and all the people inside. One outside camera caught the truck turning the corner a block away. Moments later, 2 more police cars arrived with their lights flashing and sirens wailing. Wow, timing isn't everything in life, but it feels that way sometimes. George expressed his sympathy for Officer Best's death and Officer Rigby's serious injuries. He mentioned he couldn't change what happened, but he had made some plans to help both families financially. I heard some whispers about some private financial help coming. I was grateful for it, if it's true, and I understood why it should stay secret. There are many reasons for that. I thanked them for the support, but didn't say more. George and Kevin exchanged glances, and I felt like I had passed some kind of test. "Did you notice the weapons the robbers used?" Kevin asked. "Yes. They seem to use FNP-90S, which are fully automatic. They're tough guns meant to shoot through armor, like powerful .22s. I saw some special forces using them in Iraq. They aren't common in the U.S., only a few SWAT teams have them, and Houston's one of them. I mentioned that my team had quietly looked into things. It turns out a few Houston SWAT officers left town suddenly and under strange circumstances, and they took their P-90S with them. I showed them their pictures. To me, they looked like typical American SWAT officers. Let's check out some of the robbery footage frame by frame, Kevin suggested. He ran the video in another window while shrinking the mug shots. I think these two are the ones, Kevin said, using a laser pointer to highlight them. Everyone had on subtle disguises like fake beards, wigs, trick glasses, and even some makeup. Kevin continued, "We have some connections at Homeland Security, and we ran the best facial shots we gathered through their facial recognition system. These two Houston cops came up with a possible match, around 90% likely. We believe it's them and are working from that assumption." George added, "We thought they would leave the country with their stolen goods quickly, but our ongoing searches suggest they might still be somewhere around Mobile or southern Alabama. It's not that I doubt the capabilities of the mobile police or the Alabama State Department of Investigation, but we thought they could have been out of the country in a hurry. Kevin and his team have contacts worldwide." "Really worldwide," Kevin confirmed. "We may not be the biggest law firm in the country or even in the South, but we are still among the best. We mainly work with very wealthy people and large international companies. Because of free trade and globalization, we need to grow our security and investigation team. It's interesting, but what does this mean for me personally?" This brings us back to the O'Donnell family. We are quietly looking into them. John Fitzpatrick has approached O'Donnell as a possible buyer for the painting of Gettysburg. I know he has wanted that painting for a long time. One of his ancestors was a Confederate captain who was clearly shown in the painting. John was once one of my close friends and has seen that painting many times, but we had a falling out over business, and my wife, actually my ex-wife, Mrs. Jafo, he was involved with her while we were married, and I suspect he took advantage of her. Why? Just to hurt me because I wouldn't sell him that painting. What can I say? I've been in a similar situation before. So I kept quiet. He continued talking, and we are listening to what he says, maybe in ways that wouldn't be allowed in court. Do you understand? Do you care? Not really. We're both part of the court system, and I'm sure you know what you're doing. That's like an unwritten rule. Don't get caught. We've heard your name along with a certain Susan Thornton, your wife or sister. My ex-wife, who is now living with me in Mobile. Anyway, do you know John's son, Sam O'Donnell? I didn't like where this was going. Yes, I've heard of him. The O'Donnells think they are the southern version of the Kennedys. Like those people from Boston, the O'Donnell men seem to have a careless attitude towards women and other men's partners. They treat it like a game. The word misogynist doesn't even cover it. Yes, they may seem charming, but they also have a mean and even cruel side. Plus, they have a lot of power from their wealth, though it's not at the highest level. Is this just personal feelings talking? Or do you think this Jafo person is really behind everything? I had to ask, and Kevin replied, "Believe me, we've all considered that and are trying to be fair about it. We have many other investigations going on, but this one keeps showing strange things we can't explain right now because it would take too long. George said we wanted to meet for 2 reasons. If we find out about a safe or hiding place nearby, we want your SWAT team to handle the operation. That's the right thing to do. Also, I believe your team is just as good, if not better, than what I could organize. Did you hear that Sam O'Donnell seems to be missing? No, I didn't know that, so I don't have to worry about making anything up. I hadn't heard that Sam was John's favorite and his likely successor. He thinks he's just like his dad. We also heard John say that Susan Thornton was one of Sam's last interests before Sam went quiet. And John's team told him that Susan is staying with you at Jeannie and Francoise's house in North Mobile, right? What? Really? They might want to speak with Susan. They might want to talk to you too. It might not be very nice or legal. The awful thing is that Sam drugged and hurt my ex-wife, and she never reported it to the police. But I found out and started to look into Sam O'Donnell. Maybe he learned about that and chose to lay low for a while. But if any trouble comes for Susan or me, you're right to be worried. Unfortunately, that's why we're having this meeting. Take this burner phone with you, and Kevin will keep you updated as soon as he learns anything about Susan or you. Just a safety measure. That's the best I can do for now. I truly apologize for the damage people like the O'Donnells have caused to our community. This is more bad news for Susan and Jenny. Frenchie and I will need to figure something out, like having some trusted men around when we can't be there. John sounds like one of those rich people who think power is all that matters. This situation could get serious. I can see it going a lot of different ways that could be hard to handle. There might be paid detectives who could come and ask Susan to go back to Gulf Shores for questioning about Sam's disappearance, and then just hand her over to Sam's people. And if Sam's people show up, they could take her without a trace. That could be a way for Sam to send a message. Maybe. I need to keep Butler on my side since his wealth might help balance out Sam's. But Butler seems to care about having some principles and a good reputation. He hasn't gotten even with Sam for taking his wife, or maybe he did get the better deal in that situation. He definitely wants his paintings back more than he wants his ex-wife. Or maybe Sam will just come back and all of this will be over. I told Frenchie everything I was thinking when he suddenly said, "Oops, oops." I asked him what he meant by that. He replied, "Johnny, I don't think Sam is going to show up anymore." "Why do you think that?" I asked, feeling a bit scared. He explained, "Last weekend, the guys and I were chatting while we were out catching frogs and having some drinks. We were talking about the whole situation with Jenny, and we decided to find Sam O'Donnell and have a word with him." I knew catching frogs was a way of saying they were doing something illegal, but there were so many alligators around that they were more of a hassle than a danger. Some people believed that reducing their numbers was wrong, but I thought it was okay since there were so many. I had also heard about Jenny's story. Her first husband was handsome but cruel. He hurt her and left her and their son all alone. It was sad but not too surprising. People go missing all the time in the U.S., especially ex-husbands who run away from taking care of their kids. "What happened next?" I asked. He said, "We found out where Sammy liked to hang out from a couple of my family members and friends who work in the police. Finding him wasn't hard. I showed him my badge, checked his ID, and interrupted his date with a very drunk woman. We took him with us and put handcuffs on him in the back of my truck. Then we drove him out to 20 Mile Swamp. It's 20 miles long but not wide, so he could have walked out if he knew where to go. We even left him his clothes and cowboy boots. We just cut off the legs of his pants and maybe we nicked his legs a little. He wasn't bleeding much. Sam didn't seem like the type to handle a swamp well. He was crying a lot when we left him in just a couple feet of water around 1 a.m. We intended to scare him and planned to go back for him in the morning. We thought he could just climb a tree and stay safe for the night, but I guess he didn't think of that. We searched for him and called out, but it seemed like he didn't make it. Just like Jenny's ex. I felt so frustrated. Is there any chance he could still be alive? Frenchie replied, "Rich, many holes like that can be a big problem. I'll have some guys search again, but I really doubt it. I know it was wrong, but that guy reminded me too much of Jenny's ex. I really like Susan, and she didn't deserve all this." I hung my head in shame. We weren't supposed to take matters into our own hands, but it felt like the rich and handsome just get away with too much these days. Maybe this was just what they deserved. Anyway, it seemed like Sam wasn't going to show up again, so Frenchie thought some of his friends and family could help keep an eye on Jenny's house during the day. Frenchie promised he would handle it, and Susan would never know. Jenny and Carla were aware of the situation and both owned guns that were safely stored away from the kids, but they could get them if needed. Just 2 days later, after John and Frenchie's talk, a sheriff's car turned off the main road and drove down the long gravel driveway to Jenny's home. A friend of Frenchie's, dressed in camouflage, spotted the car right away. He called Jenny to give her a warning and also contacted his partner who was closer to the house. He then ran through the woods and took his position with a scoped. 223 rifle ready to watch the front door. 2 sheriff's deputies got out of the car and knocked. "Yes?" Jenny asked when she opened the door. "Is Miss Susan Thornton here?" the taller deputy inquired. "Yes. What's this about?" Jenny knew some backup was watching and decided to take her time to make sure everyone was in the right place. "We just need to ask her a few questions, please. Can we come in?" "No. Please wait here and I'll get her. Just a few minutes, please." Jenny shut the door and told Carla to get Susan and make sure the kids stayed upstairs. Jenny then unlocked a small closet and took out her best friend, a loaded .22 rifle. It looked a bit like a toy gun with its plastic stock, but it was very accurate and reliable. Hunters preferred this rifle for its low-cost ammo and its ability to work well in bad weather. It was loaded with special bullets that were very effective for hunting. Susan had no idea about the potential danger and acted completely normal. Carla kept a hidden .357 Magnum revolver, but Susan didn't notice it or the rifle. Jenny leaned against the wall near the door and told Susan, "A couple of cops want to ask you some questions." That didn't worry Susan at all, since she often dealt with friendly police officers. Jenny opened the door for Susan to step outside and talk. Jenny stayed close by to listen in. "Hello. What do you need?" Susan asked. "Do you know a Sam O'Donnell?" Susan's heart raced a little. "Yes, I wish I didn't, but I do. What do you want to know?" "What is your relationship with him?" the deputy asked. "We were just casual acquaintances. We had dinner together 2 nights ago in Gulf Shores, and that was it. I haven't seen him since and don't expect to." "When was the last time you saw or spoke with him?" "It was a Monday night 3 weeks ago. I left Gulf Shores the next day and came here. You still don't know where he is now?" "I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. I'm sorry, but you have to come back to Gulf Shores with us to discuss everything." Susan's heart began to race. This whole conversation had been tough, and she just wanted everything about Sam O'Donnell to be behind her and forgotten. Jenny bent down and picked something up near the door. Carla also appeared, hiding one hand behind her. Suddenly, a loud voice broke the tension and said, "That's not going to happen." The deputies turned to see an older, rough-looking man who was surprisingly small for someone with such a deep voice. He was holding an old M1 carbine and pointing it in their direction. "Are you out of your mind, threatening officers with that? This thing never jams and can fire 15 shots in 5 seconds. Want to see? Just know, I'm not the person you should be worried about." He pointed out that there were 2 scopes aimed at the deputies. They started to look nervous, glancing at each other. "Okay, we'll be back with more officers," one of them said. "I don't think so. Just so you know, her husband is a SWAT lieutenant. Come back and you won't be seen again." "You should think about that while clearing out of here, and consider how many people are here that you can't see at all. You won't even hear what hits you." Jenny had grabbed Susan and pulled her back inside the house. Neither of them showed any weapons but stood their ground. The deputies would have trouble making any complaints against people they couldn't really identify. They had a lot to think about on their drive back and decided they wouldn't return, no matter how much the O'Donnells offered. They understood the dangers of confronting other officers outside their own area, especially those with strong ties, like the O'Donnells. Susan had no idea if her husband shared the same values, but it seemed he might. They also didn't want to upset large Cajun families. Susan was nearly in tears after the deputies left and wanted to know what was happening. Jenny had to explain everything, including how worried John was for her and the measures that had been put in place to protect everyone. Of course, she didn't mention what might have happened to Sam. "Please try not to worry too much. This is likely all that will happen, and John will tell you everything he knows tonight, I'm sure." A week later, I woke up in a big bed in a large, rustic bedroom. It looked like a log cabin. A huge painting of an old battle hung on the wall. I felt very confused and couldn't remember how I got here or where here was. I also had a slight headache. Could this be about my trip with John to see Rachel? We had spoken about it, but I just couldn't remember the details. Then, an unfamiliar older man came in and smiled at me. His face looked a little familiar. He looked at me and smiled in a way that made me feel uneasy as I pulled the blankets up to cover myself. "Ready for another round?" he asked. At the same time, I thought about John from a few days earlier, before Susan woke up in a strange bed. In the afternoon, I got a call on my other phone, the one George Butler had given me. "Hello? I'm sorry for calling late, but 2 sheriff's deputies from Baldwin County are on their way to pick up your ex-wife today or maybe tomorrow. Our surveillance isn't live. We just got the recordings and looked them over. It was Kevin Samberg, but he was holding back names. I decided to do the same. I guess everyone is a bit worried someone might be listening, except for the NSA, of course. They'll be on this call, but we'll do our best to keep things vague if they check the call for details. Do you have anything else?" "Yes. It's definitely who we thought it would be. It's time for another meeting at our place tomorrow morning, maybe. Okay, 10:30, I'll stop by. Great, see you then. Hope everything is okay with your ex. Me too. Bye." After that, I called Jenny to give her a heads up. "It's okay, John. They came by and spoke to Susan about Sam, wanting to take her back to Gulf Shores, but we talked them out of it. I don't think they will return, but Susan is really upset. You should tell her what's happening tonight." "Jenny, thank you for everything you've done. I feel bad that I put you and your family at risk. If you want us to move, just say the word and we will. I wouldn't blame you at all. Maybe we should. Nonsense, John. We both know this isn't Susan's fault, nor yours. Frenchie and his hot-headed friends are the ones causing trouble. If I thought Susan and the kids would be safer somewhere else, I'd say to move. But given who we're dealing with, I think this is the best place for everyone right now, especially with our friends looking out for us. I just don't know anymore. I wish I could make all this end. It's hard to worry about so many people I care about being in danger. I'm starting to understand how Susan and the others feel about our work and the risks involved. You should always keep that in mind, John. It's not easy for Susan or Gigi, or even for me, worrying about my brother and other friends on the force. And now please be careful, okay? I will, Jenny. Thanks again. Let me call Susan and talk to her for a bit. Hello, John. Are you okay? Susan spoke with concern in her voice. Hi, sweetie. I'm okay. How are you? I talked to Jenny, and she told me what happened. I'm confused, John. I never complained about anything. I don't know why those officers would want me back there, and honestly, I don't care. That little troublemaker is missing or something. It's all right. Things are a bit more complicated now than just what happened with Sam. There are other reasons at play, too. I'll explain everything tonight. For now, just try to relax and let Jenny and our friends help you. Please don't go anywhere alone with the police or anyone else, all right? Okay, John. I still love you. I know, Susan. I still love you, too, as the mother of our kids. Let's take it one day at a time. It matters to me that we are back to sharing a life. The day went by quietly, but I still felt a low level of stress about everything. I was glad to leave work on time. I couldn't wait to get home and see everyone was okay. The kids had watched the old man with a gun talking to the police from the window upstairs. They couldn't hear what was happening and didn't really understand. The adults didn't fill them in, so their imaginations ran wild. JJ, Joey, and Kimberly were all curious. That night, before bed, I explained a lot to Susan. There were two important things I couldn't tell her. Sam's fate, and that Sam's father might have been involved in the theft and murders, as well as why the police were interested in Susan. I just said there was someone connected to Sam who might want to know where he was now, and that some deputies could be bad cops. I reassured her that I wasn't blaming her for any of this. Sam and some other bad people were to blame, not her. You can't help being a beautiful woman who attracts attention, including mine, I reminded her, like I used to when we fell in love and got married. But even with my promises and feelings for Susan, I felt nervous about leaving her and the kids the next morning for work. Before I left, Jenny found a moment to reassure me that our friends were still watching over us. Susan noticed us talking and gave me a strange look, but I didn't want to add to her worries about the abduction. I didn't think her jealousy of Jenny would be a concern. I realize now that I'm just a simple guy, and I hoped my actions last night had shown Susan that I knew who I wanted to be with right now. That Wednesday morning, we had an early meeting for our SWAT team, where we would exercise and discuss our plans for the week. There was news about Karen Good as she kept getting better, but it also reminded us that we needed to stay alert and follow the rules in every situation. I didn't want anyone in my team trying to be a hero. I just wanted everyone to do their job. Then we all went off to our other tasks for the day. But first, I took Frenchie aside and said he should come with me. I had an important meeting, and he needed to be there too. At 10:35, we walked into the Butler Law offices and asked for Kevin Sandberg. They took us straight into their most private meeting room. This room was checked regularly for hidden devices. Kevin and George Butler walked in and looked at Frenchie. I introduced him. This is Frenchie Francois, my right-hand man. He knows everything and is also personally interested. They didn't look too pleased, but they had to trust me, just like I was figuring out how much to trust them. Frenchie had already saved my life a few times in Iraq, while these guys hadn't. I let that hang in the air. Nice to meet you, Frenchie. I'm George Butler, and this is Kevin Sandberg. Everyone shook hands politely. George nodded to Kevin. Okay, we have confirmation that John O'Donnell is involved in the robbery. We got a partial recording of him telling a man named David about the robbery killings. He wanted something from Gettysburg, but was told no one would get hurt. Not a guard, and definitely not two cops. He's also worried about his son, Sam, who is missing, and asked David if he found out anything about that. He claimed the deal was set, and he would only pay the already agreed amount of $5 million, Nothing more. He wouldn't pay the rest until he got the painting. "Where is it?" I thought, trying not to look at Frenchie. Silly guy. But he was my silly guy, and I was glad to have him. David told them the painting was safe for now, at the house by the bay. They could move it by truck or boat. My contact in robbery said the other guys seemed clueless, but there was still a reminder every morning to watch for anything strange concerning this big crime. We weren't taking any chances with bad luck messing things up, but the other guys were getting restless and wanted to move on. "Where do you want them to bring the painting, and is the cash ready?" they kept asking. The money was ready, and I wanted to make the exchange in southern Alabama. "Draw up the map and directions for them. Let's plan for the exchange this weekend. The cops should be busy enough with regular weekend chaos by then," John replied. Kevin added that it was surprising to hear John owned a piece of land in southern Alabama since his main home and offices were in Montgomery, the state capital. "We've been trying to find it, but it seems like it was taken and hidden really well. We will find it someday. But time is running out. Maybe J-Fo will help us find it himself. We plan to follow him with 4 teams of drivers starting Thursday. It all depends on how careful he is and how good his security team is. Plus, if he drives there instead of flying. If his estate is big enough, it might have a small airstrip for a helicopter. So, what's the plan if we find him and the painting together? What if it's not in our area? I'll need to call the local police. Honestly, what's the chance J-Fo will actually face any trouble, given his money and connections? Those are all good questions, John. The truth is, I just don't know right now. We'll have to wait to see if we find them together and where that might be. But remember, I have just as much money and probably even better connections than he does. If we catch him, he will pay. Maybe not with jail time, but it will cost him a lot of money and respect to stay out of trouble, and his career will be ruined. I can promise you that." Nothing much happened the rest of the day. I got home on time again, and everyone was in a good mood as usual. Even Susan seemed more relaxed and recovered quickly from what happened to her. I was starting to think my kids would never want to leave this place and all their new friends. It was almost surprising how many people were living together in one house with so few arguments. The idea that 2 women living together causes trouble is common, but here we had 3 women and a 13-year-old girl living together, and they all seemed to get along really well. I should be thankful for that. The next day, I got another puzzling call from Kevin. "We can't find him. He's gone off the radar. He might have found our listening devices or is using technology to block them. That's actually pretty smart. Our people around him haven't seen him at his house or office where he was usually spotted. So much for keeping a close watch starting tomorrow. I'll let you know if he shows up." This is so frustrating. There are still too many questions. Butler wants his paintings back, and I want the ones responsible for killing the guard and Jim Best, as well as those who shot Karen. But my biggest worry is J-Fo wanting to take Susan to question her about his son Sam's disappearance. I called Frenchie to fill him in too, and I suggested he notify our friends watching Jenny's place. Better safe than sorry. I was thinking about organizing a small training exercise and discreetly watching some neighborhoods near Bayfront House. One thing I learned in training was that boats anchored in one spot were not good for spying. They really drew attention. On the other hand, fast-moving boats blended in well. The solution was to practice quick drops from boats and then swim quietly to shore to watch from there. There were many houses over more than 10 miles of the bay just south of Mobile. That was probably where the stash house was located, but it would take a stroke of luck to find the right one. Maybe we could create some excitement by being a little less hidden during our training. The mobile police department didn't have observation boats yet, but I was curious about Butler's team, so I called Kevin and asked, "Do you have access to any drones?" I knew that any useful drones are, for the most part, illegal for private people to fly in the USA. "Yes, I know that," I continued. "I'm planning some training exercises near the bay south of Mobile on Friday night. We will be easy to spot as we cover as much area as we can. It could be helpful to have something in the sky to see if anyone gets anxious." I thought starting at dusk would be best. "I don't want to bother my teams Friday night, but it's time for emergency training. Kevin said he'd let me know if anything changed on his end. I thought I might find something useful on my side. I was sure he would get something similar to a Predator drone, great cameras, including night vision and infrared capabilities. We were hoping to see 5 or 6 people leaving a house quickly in a van or truck big enough to hold a 6 by 10-foot painting that was not rolled up. The FO wanted it to be as clean as possible. On Friday night, my team didn't complain too much about the mandatory training session. Lieutenant Michael Manning, who led the Mobile PD Marine Division, said his team was ready, and all 3 of our 26-foot patrol boats, with 2 200 GP motors each, were on standby. I had my 2 sniper teams with night scopes on 2 of the boats. The 3rd boat had our 2 trained swimmers for quick insertion. That boat could go 25 miles per hour, staying between 50 and 100 yards from shore. For the insertion, the swimmers would swim in as effectively as they could, then look around with their own night vision gear for 10 minutes before calling for pickup. The boat moved closer to the shore with bright lights shining, and our team got back on board. Then we headed to another location to repeat our tasks. Our swimmers were likely tired by the time we planned to finish the exercise, which lasted about 3 hours. However, they were in great shape and very proud of themselves. They wore snug wetsuits and had skills that helped them stay afloat with buoyancy vests and weights. They had black snorkel masks and fins and carried all their gear, including MP5 firearms and night vision tools, in black waterproof bags. This routine wasn't a big deal for them. The other 2 boats were at least 100 yards away, with our snipers keeping an eye on the swimmers to ensure everything went smoothly. Those boats stayed still in the water, watching over the swimmers and the shore. Only Frenchie and I knew about the drone watching from above and the true reason for the exercise. It felt like a long 3 hours for everyone involved. The only interesting thing that happened was our brave swimmers spotting a couple outside on their porch. Being respectful, they waited until the couple finished before calling in the retrieval boat with its bright lights. The couple quickly went inside, and everyone shared a laugh. Still, it was a long night ahead, and many of the officers would be back on duty the following day. At least the overtime pay was approved for them. But money doesn't always make up for family time lost, and I understood that better now. It was almost 12:30 a.m., and I was heading home when I got a phone call. I think we might have made a breakthrough. Around 11:15 p.m., we noticed 6 people leaving a house by the bay. They seemed to be in a hurry and split into 2 large vans with 3 people in each one. One van went north, and the other went south when they reached I-10. We followed the one going north, but they stopped at another house, still in Mobile, just off I-65. I'll text you a screenshot of the house and its exact GPS coordinates. Maybe we're tracking the wrong van. I thought the northbound one was more likely heading to the estate, but now I'm not sure. Can you keep an eye on that house? I have some people on their way. The drone can only stay in the air for another hour before it needs to refuel. It's going to be tight whether my team arrives first, but they probably aren't going anywhere else tonight. It's your decision, though. If we crash the drone, we'll lose our coverage completely. I know if we had another drone, the choice would be easier, but we don't, and might need it tomorrow for continued surveillance. We only have a few people on the ground. What will you do if they stay there tomorrow? If they're still there in the late afternoon, we'll move in then. We can't let the robbery crew know about our plans before we arrive since they have a contact there. However, I think I can count on the lead homicide detective, Fred. I'll take care of this part. If I don't hear from you by 2 p.m. tomorrow, I'll assume it's a go for my team to move in at 11 the next morning. I met with Fred, the homicide detective, for a private talk. I've been working with the robbery team on a murder case, and I believe we have a solid lead. How soon can you get a warrant for this address based on a tip we received from an informant? This situation seems serious enough. I can have my team ready to go this afternoon with just an hour's notice. If these guys are as dangerous as we think, we need to be ready for anything. Wow, John, I didn't know you had any authority to do this, Fred said. I replied, sorry if it seems like I'm overstepping. This all came up suddenly. I know it's a bit risky for you to get a PSI warrant, but you can approach it slowly and politely. If it turns out to be a simple family at home, we'll know quickly. Then I'll be the one looking foolish if my team is ready for action, but it's unnecessary. Okay, I'll do my best. With luck, it shouldn't take more than an hour. I'll let you know when I have the warrant, Fred said. Thanks, Fred. Even if this lead is wrong, I owe you a big favor, I replied. Oh, and keep this information to yourself until we're all on site, he said. Got it. I hope this works out, I said. Fred called me at 12:30 to say he had the warrant. He and his partner were going to serve it with a couple of officers at 3 p.m. That was perfect timing, and I relayed the call to my team by 1:30. But then Kevin called to say the suspects had already left by 3. We were ready, with 2 of my team members in uniform watching the back and sides. Fred and his partner knocked on the door, but no one answered. He shouted, "Police!" and one of the officers broke the door down. Fred looked inside and waved at me, signaling I could enter. "Make sure the house is clear before we start searching," he instructed. Fred was experienced and knew what he was doing. Frenchie led the way, and I followed him with 2 of my guys close behind. Suddenly, I heard shouting and the sounds of rapid gunfire from the back of the house, followed by some shotgun blasts, likely from my team or the responding patrol officers. We were committed to this situation and had to follow the proper steps to clear the house quickly but carefully. I hoped Frenchie recalled the lesson we always follow. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Before we all entered the house, someone reached out from a doorway with a machine gun and started shooting. Frenchie, crouched low, returned fire at the wall next to that doorway with his own gun. I shouted for everyone to duck and then stood up to fire 2 shots at the wall with my shotgun. After that, I tapped Frenchie and we rushed into the room together. He peeked around the corner and then moved forward. One man was on the ground, holding his injured arm, which looked like it might be broken badly. It was unfortunate that he was still alive, as he was now a problem for us. Frenchie knelt over him and checked him thoroughly. We had to get 2 of our guys to carry him out for medical help. Honestly, I was ready to let him bleed. I was more worried about my guys and where the others might be hiding. As we moved down a hallway deeper into the house, a voice shouted, "Okay, I'm giving up! Don't shoot!" A gun clattered out into the hallway. I yelled back, "Put your hands out!" He did and slowly moved forward. Frenchie stayed back, saying he would cover me. I stepped in closer and quickly tied up the man. Frenchie didn't sound right. He looked a bit pale and shaky. "How bad is it?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Just one got through near my appendix." I told him to stay still and said we would search the rest of the house quickly and then get help. My other 2 guys returned and were watching Frenchie closely. "Come on, let's wrap this up," I urged. We found another man shot dead in a back room. He must have been trying to escape through the window after shooting, but it was a dangerous choice and he didn't make it. We quickly checked the rest of the house and found a stack of covered paintings in another bedroom. Once we finished checking, I called for the EMTs to help Frenchie. Fred and his partner stayed to look at the paintings. It was clear the main one we expected wasn't there, and there were only 6 in total. It was another tough day for the mobile police unit, especially for my group. My backup sniper, Andy Thibodeau, who was great at shooting from boats, had also been hurt behind the house. He had been hit in the arm but would need some time to recover before he could work again. Frenchie was stable and on the way to the hospital. He was awake and trying to joke around, but I felt sick. We wouldn't know how he was doing until after his surgery. The number of injuries in my unit was as high as in any of the teams I had worked with in Iraq. I knew I needed to call Jenny, Gigi, and Andy's wife to update them. He came from a family that knew a lot about living in the swamp. He had learned how to shoot alligators in the waters of Louisiana, where it was legal to hunt them during the right season with the proper permits. He could shoot better than many people I knew, even without formal training. I called Jenny first. Jenny Frenchie had been shot and he was at the USA Medical Center. The last time I saw him, he was awake and joking, but I was worried. "Are you okay? Is anyone else hurt?" "I'm fine, but Andy Thibodeau got shot in the arm and is on the way to the hospital," she said. Frenchie took a hit to his torso. "I need to call Gigi. Is Susan with you?" "Yes, hold on." I heard Jenny calling for Susan and telling her that Frenchie got shot. "John, are you all right?" Susan asked. "I'm okay. I think Frenchie will be too, but you might need to watch the kids if Jenny wants to go to the hospital." "Sure, I'll help. I can take care of the kids. I owe Jenny so much." "Thanks. Just let the kids know I'm fine, but I might be late tonight." I needed to call Gigi now, but when I did, it went straight to voicemail. I didn't like leaving messages, so I called Jenny again. "Can you please let Gigi know? I keep getting voicemail." "I've already called her and left a message. I'm on my way to the hospital with Carla, and Susan is watching the kids." "I really appreciate Susan helping out," I replied. I could hear a bit of frustration in Jenny's voice about Gigi, but she was kind about Susan. Next, I called Andy's wife. She was already heading to the hospital. One of his friends had already reached out to her, and she seemed calm. I told her I would see her soon because I was heading there too. Finally, I called Kevin to keep him updated. We had caught 3 suspects and recovered 6 paintings, but Gettysburg was not one of them. "Maybe you followed the wrong van or they delivered it already," I said. "Any luck finding the estate?" Kevin asked. "Yes, I have some top accountants looking into it. So far, we've only found public financial records." "It's a bit tricky," he replied. "Let's hope something good comes up. Just wait for the police to update us about the 6 paintings. It's best to keep a low profile for now." I expected some backlash from today's events. Almost a third of my team had been shot since I took charge. It could be just bad luck, but people were going to be upset. I couldn't deny I felt unhappy too, but at least none of my team had died yet. Given what we were facing, maybe that was a sign of some good luck. Jenny and Carla both hugged me in the waiting room as we waited for news about Frenchie. Andy had been really fortunate because his gunshot wound was not too serious. It didn't hit any important bones or nerves. He was already out of surgery, stitched up and bandaged, and he wouldn't need to stay overnight. He sat with us, with his young wife close by his side. Gigi hadn't answered her phone or returned any calls, and I could see that Jenny was becoming a little worried about that. Finally, Gigi called Jenny with the news. She arrived almost 45 minutes later, looking like she had been crying a lot and couldn't stop. Jenny and Carla hugged her and offered to grab her some coffee or something. She didn't say hello to me or anyone else, and she wouldn't meet my gaze. I couldn't help but think that poor Frenchie being shot might not be the worst part of his day. Gigi should have been upset with me for what happened to him. She had once made me promise that I would never let this happen. But people break promises all the time. Just then, the surgeon came out smiling. Frenchie was going to be okay, as long as there weren't any other problems. He had lost his appendix, which meant he wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. He also lost a foot of his large intestine, but they had fixed that up, and that was why the surgery took so long. They cleaned out what they could, and he would need antibiotics for a week to prevent any infections. He should be able to walk tomorrow and might go home in about 5 days if everything goes as planned. The doctor said Frenchie was in recovery and was already asking for his wife. Gigi looked worried about seeing him, but Jenny gently encouraged her to go. Gigi was quietly crying, and they didn't seem like tears of joy. I looked at Jenny and quietly asked if we could get some coffee. She nodded, and we headed to the cafeteria. I asked her what was happening with Gigi. Was there anything I needed to know to help Frenchie? She sighed. Gigi wasn't being honest with her, but she suspected Gigi might be leaving Frenchie. It seemed there might be someone else already. She didn't have a solid reason for being away today. Gigi had said something about auditioning for a movie in Los Angeles. Really? She mentioned moving there, and Frenchie knew about it, but he didn't feel strongly enough to go with her for her big chance. Poor girl. I never expected this at all. I didn't know how Frenchie would react, but if it didn't go well, I worried Gigi would be in trouble. It felt like things had turned messy lately. I thought Frenchie and Gigi were one of the lucky couples. I was pretty sure Frenchie had never looked at another woman while he was married to Gigi. This shocked me because before, he was a fun-loving single guy who never seemed to settle down with anyone. He used to have no trouble meeting people just by going out for a drink. Why commit to one person when so many were interested? I also thought Gigi was just as loyal to him. But any ideas I had about women changed 2 years ago. Maybe Gigi had her own problems, but I knew from experience that nothing could ease the hurt when Frenchie's wife just left him. I didn't want to leave him alone, but I knew there was nothing I could do for now. Maybe Gigi would come back. I also needed to see my own family. So I told Jenny, I guess he'll get through the night. I need to head home. I can take Carla back if you want to stay. Jenny replied, No, you're right. I need to go home too. I'll take care of Carla. You know, Frenchie enjoys what he does. He likes being in control, and he really appreciates people trusting him. I trust you too, Johnny. Just so you know. Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate that. I love Frenchie like a brother. And I care about you too. How could I not? You're such a nice person, even with your moments. But Susan is the mother of my kids, and I feel a responsibility to her for better or worse through sickness and health. She is trying hard, and I respect that. I owe her. She gently placed her fingers over my lips and said, You don't need to explain yourself. I liked Susan from the start. And I know she's working hard for you and your kids. She's a great mom, and I'm not here to break your family apart. That's not going to happen. Let's focus on Frenchie for now. I'll see you at home, she said brightly, though her eyes looked wet with unshed tears. When we got home, it wasn't too late. We spent time with the kids and answered their questions. They knew Frenchie had been hurt, but we assured them he would be all right. We told them that everything they saw on TV wasn't real. Cops got hurt, but they came back in next week's show. That seemed to help them relax a little. But they had seen me get shot, and that took a long time to heal. Just a year ago, and they understood the real risks of gunshot injuries. It was almost 11 before the kids finally went to bed. Abby had already fallen asleep in my lap, so I carried her to her room. Susan and I held each other in bed, and she cried softly. I whispered, "It's okay, honey. Frenchie is going to be all right." I can't help but cry a bit. Just hold me and it will get better. It reminds me of the time you got shot, and I felt so helpless and guilty. I know this is your choice of work, and it's important work. But it can be dangerous, and I get scared sometimes. It's okay if you cry too. I wish you didn't have to. I don't like this feeling, but I understand you more now. It's surprising you didn't break down worrying about me before. I didn't want to add to your worries, but I've been anxious about you and the kids since those deputies came to see you the other day. That gives me a little sense of what you've dealt with while we've been married. I'm sorry. I took you for granted all these years. Oh, honey, I wanted you to care for me without thinking and just keep loving me like you always have. I tried my best and never regretted being married to you. I only lost my way for a moment. I'll always wish I could go back to how we were, what we had before. I think we might be getting close again, sweetheart. I never stopped loving you. Not really. I tried to move on, but I couldn't. Let's both try not to worry too much. Just one day at a time, okay? She stopped crying, and soon we were asleep in each other's arms again. We woke up late the next morning. It was Sunday. Jenny took care of our early riser, Abby, and made her favorite waffles for breakfast, letting us sleep till 9 a.m. Everyone had the day off, and I really hoped we could all relax together. I just needed to visit the hospital to see Karen and Frankie. Karen was actually going home today. She was getting better and walking a little each day. While at the hospital, her collarbone had been fixed but couldn't be put in a cast. They had to keep her arm still so her bone could heal properly. The shoulder joint might get stiff and would need some painful exercises later, but Karen was strong and ready to work hard. I heard that half of those responsible for her injury were now caught. I saw Karen first as she left the hospital with her fiancé and parents. She would be staying with him for now. Having a loving family around is a good thing. Then I checked on Frenchie. He was awake but looked a bit down when I walked in. But as soon as he saw me, he smiled like he always does. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Not too bad, Johnny. The nurses here are really nice," he replied. "Frenchie, what would Gigi think?" I said without thinking. "Honestly, Gigi is gone. She's in LA chasing a dream now. She talks about it like it's the best thing ever," he said, looking a bit lost. "Oh man, with you resting here, I can't believe it," I said, shaking my head. "Oh well, she never really felt real to me, you know. It was like a long, sweet dream. She was just too lovely inside and out, and her voice was so special I thought she had to be a fantasy. I probably should not have asked her to marry me, but I thought she would never say yes, even if I did. But she did say yes, and I felt nervous about what that meant for me. I knew it wouldn't last forever. She was like a princess, and I am many things, but I am not a prince. Yeah, I was a bit sad, but I would get over it. I also thought some of the nurses here might help me feel better soon." Frenchie smiled his usual cheerful smile. I just managed to smile back, trying my best. I knew he was feeling pretty down right now, and it might last a while. No one gets over someone like Gigi quickly or easily. The fact that Frenchie was so loyal to her showed just how much he cared, and we both understood that. For guys like Frenchie and me, just being hurt and in the hospital was tough enough. Sitting around got boring fast, especially once the pain was under control. Plus, it gave him too much time to think and worry. I had just been through that myself about a year ago. I muttered something like, "We should have a drink." He just laughed and said, "Not for a couple of weeks," the doctor warned. "I need my stomach to heal, but maybe I can help you get some pain medication." That's almost as good. What's that saying? When it rains, it pours? Or something like bad things happen in threes. That fit better. As it turned out, Frenchie getting shot was the first bad thing. The second was Susan disappearing, and the third was something else. Meanwhile, I heard on the news that John Fitzpatrick O'Donnell was a big story. A SWAT team action on Saturday had ended in a shootout, with one bad guy dead and another hurt, while a third was caught. They also found 6 stolen paintings from a robbery a few weeks before. 2 members of the SWAT team had also been shot, but they were recovering now. I called David, who heads my small security and investigations team, that night. I set up a meeting for the next morning. I felt angry and a little nervous, but I wouldn't admit that. I knew I was in my southern estate, which is a big area outside Bayou La. It's 60 acres of thick woods and right next to swamps that lead to the Gulf Coast in the far south of Alabama. The house is a spacious 5-bedroom log cabin, very private and safe, with strong alarm systems both inside and out. The estate also had a barn for equipment and a guest house, which now held my 6-person security team. These were 6 of David's best and most trusted former government agents. I had $4.5 million in cash with me. I was getting ready to do a tricky deal with some dangerous criminals, just like myself. My wife Wendy, who used to be Mrs. Wendy Hamilton Butler, and I had come here late last Tuesday night. I wasn't sure if I was being watched, but sometimes it's true that worries come from real threats. I knew I had some real enemies because I had made them myself. Sometimes I didn't even know why I did things like that. I just could, and I wanted to. We left all our phones and electronics behind at our main home and drove away in an old, worn-out F-250 pickup with our Mexican groundskeeper at the wheel. In the back seat behind tinted windows, we felt hidden. Wendy complained the entire ride until we switched to our more comfortable Hummer limo. It was a nice drive into the woods of southern Alabama. We were far from anyone watching, whether real or imagined. I quickly fell asleep for the remaining 5 hours of the trip. Everything at the estate was brand new and bought secretly by David's team. None of it connected back to me or my wife. The internet service came from a satellite provider, hidden behind a strong firewall, not known to the government or any other agencies. David assured me we were as safe as we could be while still having almost complete internet access. Wendy was amazing and a lot of fun. I loved how I first won her over when she was so serious and uptight. She was the new wife of George Butler. My charm didn't work on her at first, but after I introduced her to certain things, she relaxed completely. She changed so easily that I never had to use any secrets against her. After that, she was all mine. It was clear for both of us. She left Butler's house and came to mine. I had hoped for a long divorce process, but George just let her go without a fight. He didn't even mention any scandal. Maybe he wanted to avoid the attention that came with it, while I actually did. We were supposed to be great friends from our time at Harvard Law School, but I pretended to be his friend, just like he did. I knew he came from a rich family, and he looked down on me for my less wealthy background. Taking away his wife was a thrill and made me feel powerful. What I really wanted was that painting of Gettysburg that he owned, though. It would be amazing to have his wife in that painting, too. If I could get all his money, that would be even better. But that seems unlikely. He was pretty smart and had good self-control. I thought he would be really upset when I took his young and beautiful wife from him, but maybe I could still get a lot of his money. I wondered if I could steal his painting and sell it back to him for $50 million or so. I think he might go for that if I played my cards right. I could probably do it quietly, but I really wanted him to know it was me. I wanted him to feel the same sting I did when I took Wendy away from him. I was still figuring out my final plan, and first, I needed to get the painting. And today was supposed to be the day that happened, but I had to deal with the mess that was happening now. I didn't like to control my own team too much, and David usually handled all the tricky things well. But this time, things went wrong. I had told them not to hurt anyone during the robbery. Now, this could change everything for me. With those 2 deaths and that young officer getting hurt, the spotlight was on me, not George. Now I had 2 guys in custody who would probably talk to save themselves from serious punishment. The authorities would surely be looking for connections, and things could get complicated. David had to assure me that no one could trace this back to me or my son. Sam was still missing. There was a rumor he was last seen being taken out of a bar by an undercover officer, but no one could confirm it. I also knew about Susan Thornton, whom Sam had mentioned, and I really wanted her to be questioned. I wanted to talk to her myself, too. Finally, David arrived a little after 10 a.m. on Sunday morning. "Okay, tell me everything, and it better be good." "I'm trying to figure out how they were caught," he said. "My source in robbery, who thinks I'm just a reporter, said he didn't hear anything until the whole SWAT team was surrounding the house. Fred, the lead detective, said the tip came from someone else who noticed the SWAT lights." "Great!" I shouted. "Butler knows what we're doing, and you didn't find this out earlier?" "Calm down," David said. "Maybe we're still covering all our bases. Maybe we underestimated him." "Maybe you did," I replied. "I'm just following your instructions, remember? Or maybe those Houston SWAT guys told on the other three so they wouldn't have to share the $5 million. Those two and their girlfriend are very close. It's funny because they are the three who got away, while the others didn't. That would be the best outcome. But I need to be sure. You have to fix this, really fix it. Even if it means stopping the whole operation and getting rid of that entire group. Understand? Yes, that might be our best option, but let's not rush things. It turns out the SWAT officer is named John Thornton. Does that name sound familiar? Like Susan Thornton? It's not a coincidence. He's her ex-husband. They are living together again now and have 4 kids. I know you wanted to talk to her about Sam, but we might also need something to use against him. Find out what he knows and make sure he can be controlled. That's an interesting idea. What about the other 3 involved in the robbery and the rest of the paintings? They are supposed to be here early this afternoon. One of my teams is meeting them. Where? Check the map. They have connections and will drive their van the rest of the way. If everything seems clear and the van passes our checks, we will decide then. I decided to meet them in person. If they couldn't convince me they were completely trustworthy, they would not leave here. They needed to understand that unless they wanted trouble. I stood outside when the van pulled up, with my guards clearly visible. First, I needed to see the painting. It was in the back of the truck with 3 smaller paintings. You brought those other paintings too? Yes. You can take them if you want. I know they were supposed to be ours, but things are too risky right now. We just want the rest of the money, the $4.5 million. Okay. I watched my guards unload the van and carefully bring the main painting inside. I hung it on the wall in my master bedroom and then met them in the office. How did the other 3 get caught? They surprised us. Okay, maybe I panicked a bit. I didn't think the local police would be clever enough to do a big operation on a Friday night with their whole SWAT team and patrol boats. I really thought they were onto us, and we left in a hurry believing we got away, but maybe we didn't. They somehow found Doug's van at their other safe house, but not ours. Maybe we were just lucky. This whole situation hasn't gone as I was promised. I am really upset. There were shootings and deaths. You have no idea what this is really about, and you did not have permission to just shoot people. Now I'm wondering if you all should just vanish too. Things are getting a lot more tense right now. I thought everyone had weapons, but my team was already ready with theirs out. 3 of them had MP5 guns. The robbers only had handguns and didn't look like they wanted to make any hasty moves. They knew they were in trouble. You really don't want to do that, Peter said. He was in charge of the robbers. I've written some letters for a few important people, friends who will share them with others and the authorities if something happens to me or to us. I glanced at David and he smiled back. I replied, "That's no big deal. You don't even know who I am." "Who really hired you?" Peter asked. "You're John F. O'Donnell. From what I've found out, the F stands for something rude. Your friends call you that behind your back. I know you think we're a bunch of fools, but I want to know what I'm getting into for $5 million. There are only a few people who fit this kind of profile, and you're at the top." "Yeah, it's me, now that we've met," I said. David's smile faded, and mine did too. "But if you pay us and keep your end of the deal, you'll be fine. We'd even be happy to work for you again later. You need people like me, or you wouldn't have reached out to work with us in the first place, right?" We clearly needed more time. We couldn't just get rid of these people right away. David would have to find their friends and get those letters back. I was upset and felt disrespected, but I knew I could turn the tables eventually. Maybe I could talk to Peter's girlfriend, the one who went into Butler's office with him during the job. If I could connect with her, she might share important information, but I needed to be patient. "You've made your point, and I get it," I finally said. "And I have a smaller job for you. I need you to bring a woman here safely so I can have a conversation with her. I won't pay you extra for this because it's also for your safety. She's the ex-wife of the SWAT lieutenant who set up the plan that caught your team. I think we both need to find out what she knows. I can use her to get that information. There's also something more personal I need to discuss with her. I paused for a moment. Wait here while I grab your payment. I went back inside with 2 large suitcases full of cash. Each suitcase had $100 bills stacked high, making them heavy to carry. David, give them all the details about Susan Thorne. I want her here by Wednesday at the latest. Make it happen, and let's start cleaning this up. Frustration bubbled inside me because I couldn't just get rid of those people right away. But maybe Susan would be useful for my plans. So the focus now turned to Susan as Monday rolled ahead. Life must go on. Frenchie was shot, but he was recovering well in the hospital. So far, there were no problems with his health. Jenny and Carla treated me like another sister, or maybe a cousin. I learned that Gigi seemed to have left town, maybe even the state. This was a big issue for Frenchie right now. I felt embarrassed when I heard that and couldn't help it. I felt bad and guilty because I had done something similar to John before, and I really regretted it. Reason didn't seem to matter in that moment. Maybe Gigi was dealing with her own feelings, but I thought she might regret leaving Frenchie, just like I regretted what I had done to John. But there was a monthly party coming up next weekend. Frenchie would want that party to happen, even if he wasn't there. Kimberly wanted a new dress, and so did I. I needed some quality time with my oldest daughter, and a trip to the mall seemed perfect. John went to work that morning while I took care of the kids as Jenny and Carla went to visit Frenchie around noon. We planned that Kimberly and I would go shopping as soon as they got back, and we wanted to be home by 5 p.m. before John came back from work. There hadn't been any new contact from the authorities in Gulf Shores. That strange visit from the Baldwin deputy 6 days ago felt like a distant memory. So much had happened since then, both good and bad. It was easy to think of that visit as just a mistake. Kimberly was starting to notice boys more, but they noticed her even more. I just hoped she wouldn't have to deal with the same drama I did at her age. But there was something important I wanted to talk to her about. "Kim, honey, do you like it here?" I asked. "Mom, this has been one of the best summers of my life," she replied. "It's been different, but in so many good ways. You and Dad being together with us? Even Jay is behaving better than usual." "How would you feel if we all moved here and stayed?" I asked. "Your dad really seems to like it here," I said, "but you would have to start over in a new school." "Well, moving here would be a bit scary," Kimberly said. "I would miss my good friends in St. Louis, but as long as some of Jenny's family was around, I'd be okay." "They're all really nice people, you know," I said. "Yes, I know," she smiled. I felt a little lighter with her words. She was such a good kid, and I knew John loved her and all the kids very much. He would be upset if we returned to St. Louis in just a few weeks. Now it was time to make a choice about finding our own house in a good school area, both for studying and having friends. For Kimberly, the next few hours were a lot of fun. It was the happiest I had seen her in a long time. Ever since that time with Jack living with us, things had been tough. Even though I had messed things up, I could see Kimberly was really unhappy that whole year. But now everything felt bright and cheerful again. We were lost in our shopping, enjoying each other's company. I didn't notice anyone else around us. Not even the scruffy older man or the younger guy with dark hair who were nearby. We both bought new dresses and shoes. I picked open-toed sandals with sturdy heels for walking on grass, hoping they would be comfy to dance in too. Mine had 3-inch heels and Kimberly's had 2-inch heels. She was just starting to wear heels and was almost as excited as I was. Our little girl was really growing up. Eventually, we stopped for a snack at the food court. I needed to use the restroom, and usually we'd go together, but with all our shopping bags, it was easier to go one at a time while the other stayed with our things. When I came out, a pretty woman with short blonde hair was at the sinks. She smiled at me and then looked surprised. "Susan? Is that you?" she asked, sounding really excited. "Yes," I replied, but I didn't recognize her at all. She reached out and took hold of my arms, and that's when I felt a strange sensation. Suddenly, I felt lightheaded, almost like I was floating. The woman opened her shopping bag and pulled out a nice jacket, putting it on me. I could barely stand up, and my arms felt so heavy. I felt calm, like everything was okay. Then she placed a blonde wig on my head and big sunglasses on my face. Everything felt too bright in that bathroom. She pushed me out the door, and a man was there to help. Instead of going back to the food court, we went through a door marked Employees Only. That's when I started to feel alarm bells ringing in my mind. I tried to speak, but it was hard. I mumbled, "Wait, where's Kim?" But they kept moving me. Then a door opened to a bright light, and I saw an open van door. Before I knew it, they pushed me into the dark inside, and I felt myself fading away. Now let's hear Kimberly's side of the story. I was at the food court, enjoying some waffle fries and sipping my smoothie when a young man with dark hair came over and sat down. "Kimberly, right? I'm Jake, Jenny's cousin." "Jake? I thought I had seen him at the last party." "Oh, hello," he said. He looked familiar and had a nice accent. Many of the Cajun guys with their tall, dark looks were really charming. One reason I enjoyed being here was just being with my dad. Then my Uncle Billy pointed to an older man who looked a bit messy. "Where's your mom?" Billy asked. "Oh, she's in the bathroom. It's been a while," I replied, glancing back toward the restrooms. Billy quickly walked over that way. Jake tried to smile at me, but he seemed worried, which made me a little worried too. What was happening? When Billy returned, he shook his head, and Jake looked even more upset. Both of them took out their phones. I heard Jake say, "Susan's missing. She went to the restroom and didn't return." He listened for a moment and then handed me the phone. "Hello?" My voice trembled a bit. "It's me, Kimberly. Jenny, Billy, and Jake are your friends. We are taking care of you and your mom, but something might have happened. We just want to make sure you are okay while we look for Susan. I'm calling your dad. We'll give him Jake's phone number. Just stay where you are and your dad will come to you, or Billy and Jake will bring you home. Try not to worry too much. She might just be with another officer like the ones who came by last week. We'll clear things up soon." I was trying very hard not to panic. I wasn't scared of Billy or Jake, but they both looked worried, which upset me. In a few moments, Jake's phone rang again, and he passed it to me. "Hello? Hi, sweetie, it's Dad. Are you okay?" I felt like crying. "Where's Mom? Dad, is she okay?" No, it's nothing like that. It's just a mix-up. Listen, I'm coming right over. I should be there in about 20 minutes. Just stay with Billy and Jake and do what they say, okay? I'm calling mall security too, so someone might want to talk to you before I arrive. And remember, don't let anyone take you away from Billy and Jake. Do you have your phone with you?" "Yes." "Good. Don't run down the battery until I get there, okay? I'm really sorry for all this. I'm sure your mom didn't leave you on purpose. We'll find her soon. Bye, sweetie." 2 more officers came over and asked if I was Kimberly Thornton and what was going on. Billy explained to them, and they went back toward the restroom area. About 15 minutes later, Dad arrived. I rushed to him, hugged him, and cried a little. He just held me and patted my back, assuring me everything would be okay. I felt a lot better. Dad was so strong and comforting. Jenny also came by and glared at Billy and Jake, and they looked pretty unhappy then. Jenny hugged me and told Dad it was best to take me home now. I wasn't sure what to do with Billy and Jake. Finally, Jake spoke up. "Hey, Jenny. Everything seems fine. We didn't see anyone or anything odd, and we couldn't follow her into the restroom," he said. Dad then said, "You were watching out for them?" "Yeah, Jenny asked us to. After what happened last week," Billy replied. "Okay, Jenny," Dad said again. "Let them stay with me and I'll check if we can see any security video right now." Dad hugged me tightly, and Jenny put her arm around me to help carry our bags to her car. I would have given up all my new clothes and shoes just to have my mom back. As we walked to the mall security room, I asked Billy and Jake if they had seen anyone following them. Billy said, "This isn't my first time around. Whoever they were very good at what they did. It must have been a team." "No way one person could have done it alone, not unless they were really lucky," Jake added. "Yeah, but I'm not worried about crazies," I said. I was concerned about the CFO's goons. It didn't seem like a planned thing like the Butler heist. It all felt spontaneous and they handled it well. Modern cell phones made everything easier. I figured a woman was probably the main one following, switching places with someone else, which is why Billy missed it. The video caught Jenny going into the restroom. Then another woman with sunglasses and short blonde hair entered, never looking at the camera. Later, Jenny came out looking different, but it was definitely her, with the blonde and another guy as they went through a door marked Employees Only. Unfortunately, the camera in that hallway wasn't working. It had been spray painted over, and security couldn't say when that happened. Not much help, but I got a copy of the video before I left. I'd let Kevin and his team look at it. Susan was gone, and there were no leads to follow right now. I felt nauseous. The rush of adrenaline faded, and I wanted to break something in my frustration. Meanwhile, I woke up in a big bed in a large, cozy room that looked like a log cabin. There was a painting of an old battle on the wall. I felt confused and couldn't remember how I got there or where there was. I also had a headache. Was this the trip with John to see Dr. Rachel that we talked about? I couldn't quite remember. Then a strange older man I didn't know walked in and smiled at me. He looked a bit familiar. I quickly pulled the sheets up to cover myself. "Ready for another round?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." "What? You don't love me anymore? Last night you seemed to enjoy it," he said with a smirk. "Maybe this will remind you," he added, but I just felt lost and confused. He pressed a button on the remote, and the 40-inch flat-screen TV on the side table turned on, displaying a video. It was me. Slowly, memories began to return. I recalled the woman in the mall bathroom and being pushed out into a van that was waiting with its doors open. I had tried to fight back. Kimberly, what happened to my daughter? Where is she? I wasn't really thinking about Kimberly at that moment. This man was truly frightening. I remembered waking up yesterday after being taken away. I was fully dressed, lying on a bed in a different room, definitely not this one. Then a pretty younger woman walked in and said something like, "Dinner is almost ready. Come on, I'll help you get ready." What did they do to me? "Just a bit of medicine to help you relax. Less than a cigarette. You should feel fine in about an hour. Eating something will help too." She smiled sweetly. "I'm Wendy, by the way. Wendy O'Donnell." My heart sank. "Are you Sam's sister?" I asked. She laughed. "No, I'm his mom. Well, stepmom." "Oh, so she knew Sam. Do you know where he is these days?" she asked innocently. "I have no idea." I didn't really know him, and the last time I saw him was about a month ago. I wondered if she realized her sweet little boy might be a monster. "That's all right. Let's go eat," she said. The cabin was enormous. The dining room had a large, nicely set table, and the food smelled wonderful. A man was already sitting at the table and stood up as we walked in. "Hello, I'm John O'Donnell, Sam's father. I'm sorry for how you were brought here. I promise I mean no harm." "I'm just very worried about my son," he continued. "He told me about the great time he had with you before he went missing. I hope you might know something about where he is now. But first, let's eat something." He smiled and seemed friendly. I could see the resemblance between Sam and John. John was bigger in every way, but he also had charm and confidence. I didn't trust him and knew I had to be careful. I was a victim of kidnapping, after all. A servant started to bring out different dishes, beginning with appetizers and a small salad. John and Wendy both had several raw oysters, and I had a few cold shrimp. I was offered a nice white wine, which I took just a small sip of. The dull feeling from the medicine I was given gradually faded away. The conversation stayed light and friendly until after dessert. I chose raspberry shortcake with fresh cream, and the food really was delicious. I doubted Wendy was the one cooking. There was something strange about both Wendy and her husband. They exchanged a quick smirk at me once I had finished eating. Maybe after some time, my mind would clear up again. I would need to be alert to get out of this situation. I just hoped I wouldn't feel too down. Maybe I would feel a bit more energetic. A little excitement could help. I needed to act like I was cooperating so they wouldn't give me stronger drugs. Who knew what those people might do? Dr. Rachel and I discussed depression and how it might have some benefits for humans. We talked about how it shows up in many cultures along with other mental health issues. One idea was that feeling low could help some people deal with confusing social situations. It helped them stay focused during tough times. And I was definitely in a tough spot right now. O'Donnell was much bigger and stronger than me. He had his wife and plenty of guards on his side too, but I knew John and his friends would be looking for me. All I had to do was stay safe until I figured out how to escape, or until John came to rescue me. I wanted to hold on until then. I just hoped I wouldn't go crazy before that happened. Meanwhile, I felt terrible about Susan and felt really helpless. I called Kevin right away and told him everything. He said he would put his people on it as the top priority, even before looking for Gettysburg. I believed him because we both knew there was a good chance my wife and Gettysburg were together now. I decided to inform Detective Fred Arms, too, since this might be related to the Butler murder or robbery. It was serious. He had told me about a possible link between my wife's sudden abduction and that crime, and he might be able to get more police involved quickly. The video we had would help. There wouldn't be any waiting for 24 hours to report someone missing. Plus, police often looked out for each other's families. And I had a decent reputation, especially after the successful recovery of some stolen paintings. But there weren't any solid leads right now, and I really needed to get home and check on my kids. This was not a good time for Frenchie to be shot and out of action. Everything felt messy in so many ways. Fred would definitely want to speak with Billy and Jake to see why they were following Susan and Kimberly. I didn't want anyone mentioning the missing Sam O'Donnell or that John O'Donnell was behind the robbery. If that information somehow got back to JFO, Susan could disappear forever without anyone knowing. I might need police help soon, and a lot of it. At least it wasn't something really awful. I quickly called Kevin on our private phone to share everything I knew. He asked me to send him the email so his IT security expert could check it out. He warned me to expect more contact soon. They wanted something besides just questioning Susan. That was clear. About an hour later, I got another email. It said that if I wanted to see Susan again, I should log into this email account and write a reply. But I shouldn't send it. Just save it in the drafts. The password was Karma de Jesus 123. If I wasn't interested, they understood, but what about her kids? I sent this to Kevin, too. I also replied saying I wanted to see Susan again. Kevin called me back right away to let me know he got the email. Then, about 15 minutes later, he mentioned that anyone can make a Gmail account. It was probably a dead end, and it looked like some random person set it up. Google's email is actually harder to break into than many think. Only when emails go through certain systems does the information become easy to access. Kevin checked the email's details and said they were likely using special software to stay hidden. He told me I'd have to keep checking that drafts folder myself for any new messages. I logged into that account and found another unsent email waiting for me. Don't tell anyone else, John. We have people watching you without your knowledge. Go to this GPS location and be there by 3 p.m. If you don't hurry, you might miss this message and Susan could be in trouble. I called Andy into my office and filled him in. Get your team ready to keep a close watch on this GPS spot before I arrive. Susan's life could be at stake. Here's my personal phone number. Have someone from your team call me fast, and it has to be from their phone, not yours. Now open the door and pretend to say, "My arm hurts and I'm taking the rest of the day off," and then walk casually out of here. As I walked out, I called Kevin and decided to grab my official phone from my desk. It was a mistake to leave it behind in case someone was tracking me. I needed to keep it and play it cool. Kevin told me that the GPS location was just a crossroads in the country, a few miles from Bayou La Battery. They were either waiting for me or would take me somewhere from there. Let me get our drone ready to fly for a lookout and help your team move back a bit more. I have my own crew on the way, and I'll be right behind them. Won't they see the drone? No way. It will be way up high and very quiet. The special camera is great, and my drone operator knows what they're doing. I typed in the directions on my Samsung phone using Google Maps. It said I would arrive at 3:10, so I needed to make up for 10 minutes out of a planned 45-minute drive. I felt a knot in my stomach and my heart raced. So many things could go wrong, and I knew these dangerous people wouldn't think twice about harming Susan and me if things weren't going their way. My only edge might be that I knew more about them than they realized, and I wouldn't hesitate to take action if I had the chance. But I wasn't just planning to arrest them. As long as Susan's life was in danger, I could be ruthless too. I arrived with 5 minutes to spare. It was a crossroads with 2 blacktop roads and not much else around. At 3:10, an old beat-up pickup truck pulled up beside my car. An older gentleman named John asked me how I was. "Yes, A couple of nice guys gave me $100 to pick you up. Come on." I got in the truck and he turned around to head back to Bayou La Batterie. "Where are we going?" "Back to the restaurant where they are waiting for you." He parked at a local seafood place that was pretty busy. "This is the spot. Go on in. Your friends are inside. Have a good day, officer." I wore my uniform and hoped no other police were in there. They would surely ask who I was and what I was doing outside my area. But in my uniform and with my sidearm, cops were always curious about fake officers. So I walked inside and scanned the room. After a minute, a guy came over and said, "John, we're in the back." He led me to a table where another fit-looking guy was sitting. I didn't recognize either of them, but they looked like ex-military or special agents. One of them got a phone call and nodded at the other. "Looks clear. No one is following." "Good for you, John. Now come back to the restroom for a minute." He had a little gym bag with him. The restroom was small but spacious enough. "Change your clothes. Put these on. Leave your gun in the bag with your old clothes when you're done. Oh, and hand me your cell phone." I did what he said. It was just a big shirt and loose coveralls. They were definitely loose enough for me. Bigger is better than smaller, but I could keep my boots on. Maybe the drone would be able to see my boots. I turned off my personal small flip phone and tucked it away in my waistband. Not the most comfortable, but it was the safest spot. Susan will be very happy, and you'll see it in the videos I send you from time to time as reminders. Tell me everything you know about the Butler job investigation right now. Does George Butler know it was me? My people need to be careful. Butler suspects it's you, but he can't prove it in court. He has some connections in your organization who tell him things whenever they can. They are scared of getting caught, and the information comes a little at a time. Who are these connections? He never mentioned anyone's name, but one is supposed to be in your own investigation group. I was hoping I could stick to my simple lies without getting caught. I keep my stories easy to remember, and I try to keep a straight face. Why is Butler working with you? Because of Sam and my wife. The same contact said Georgia wants to talk with Susan about Sam and his disappearance. Is he really gone? I asked, acting innocent. Yes, I know Susan told you Sam hurt her. If Sam hurt her, she didn't mind it much. I believe that. For my own feelings toward her. The fact that she told you fits my plan well. Maybe you still care for her, but it's also possible you let that emotion cloud your judgment. You could have had a role in Sam's disappearance. Some people were asking the Gulf Shores police about Sam's actions, and I think it was you who started that. I hope you didn't do anything that can't be undone. You saw how easily we got Susan. If you don't care much for her, I could get to your kids just as easily. An eye for an eye. John wasn't smiling now. I swear I didn't do anything to Sam or have anything to do with him being gone, except maybe he's hiding because someone is looking for him. John scoffed. No way. Sam is too strong, just like I am. He wouldn't run away from scared women or their weak husbands. I think you're joking. Maybe I need to teach you a lesson by taking your woman again. Just so we are clear, take him to the master room and tie him to the chair. Don't bother the woman. She's not for you yet, John told the 3 guards as he smiled again. Wendy grabbed me and said, I can't wait, with a mischievous grin. What is that? They found the phone, and I hadn't even turned it on yet. In the bedroom, Susan was lying on the bed. John, she cried out as I was brought in. Hello, honey, I said cheerfully. Hang in there, sweetie. I'm here to rescue you. I smiled as warmly as I could. She even smiled back for a moment. If it were just 2 men trying to overpower me, I might have considered fighting back. Are you my sweetheart? She pinched my cheek. I thought maybe I could get John to free me, or, if I was lucky, get Wendy to do it while John was busy with Susie and wouldn't notice at all. Where were my friends? Did they really lose track of me? John stood up slowly, took some powder, then swallowed a little blue pill with a shot of something else. John was always into strange things. You won't be able to please her. John just smiled weakly and said, Forget it, baby, it might take a bit. Then he shouted in pain, and I saw blood coming from Susie's mouth as she bit down hard. At the same moment, she grabbed him and tried to hurt him. He held her head, but he was scared to pull her away because he thought it might hurt him more. That was his last thought before he fell to the ground, sick from the pain. She yelled, What did you do? And ran toward Susie instead of the door to get help. That was a huge mistake. Susie was furious. She jumped off the bed, grabbed Wendy's hair, and kicked her in the stomach. Then she slammed her head down on the wooden footboard of the bed. Wendy groaned and fell down. Susie even spat out something that looked like it belonged to John. "Quick! The key to the handcuffs!" I shouted as calmly as I could. She looked wild, and I could tell she was full of adrenaline. We still had a tough time ahead. John wouldn't be a problem for a while, that was for sure. He was hurt badly. Susie picked up the key and unlocked my cuffs. We both tore at the tape holding us. I finally stood up, and Susie hugged me tightly as if she would never let go. Tears streamed down my face as I held her and stroked her hair, telling her how much I loved her and how proud I was of what she did. I would always be grateful for her bravery. She finally stopped shaking and asked, "What do we do now?" I replied, "Let's handcuff them first." We cuffed them and found enough clothes around to gag them both. I wore John's clothes and Susie put on Wendy's, even if they didn't fit perfectly. We quickly searched the room for anything we could use to defend ourselves. I found a gun that looked really nice, a collector's 1911 Colt .45. There was only one loaded magazine, and I knew I couldn't take on more than 4 experienced guards, but it would make our chances better, at least for a short time. The guards had taken my phone, but I found John's iPhone in his shirt pocket. That was lucky. I called Kevin. "Kevin? John, are you all right?" "How do you mean all right? Where are you guys?" "We're here. We found you and we're about to move in on the place. It took us a bit to locate you and I'll explain later. We've been getting things ready to avoid hurting anyone while rescuing you. We didn't want you to stay as hostages, you know." "Good, that's great. I'm safe and armed. In the main house, there's a master bedroom. J-Fo and his wife are tied up now, but there are at least 3 armed guards inside. Now could be a good time to act." "All right, Kevin. I'm trying to be serious here. Honestly, just wait for 5 more minutes, max. Block that door and keep low. Don't shoot my guys or your people by mistake, all right? Andy knows what to do. Send him to me first." "Got it. I'll see you soon." The bedroom door was solid and had a good lock. It seemed soundproof. We made sure the door was locked and pushed the dresser in front of it. Then Susie and I squeezed into the closet, crouching down to stay out of sight. No stray bullets could get through the thick walls. That was good, but the windows were a weak spot. I also had a view of the door. If the guards tried to break in, I would aim for their heads. The next 4 minutes felt endless. I held Susie close and she held me back. We weren't crying. Those days were behind us. I felt strong at that moment. Suddenly, I heard a faint gunshot. It was a sharp sound followed by another shot, and then everything went quiet. John was starting to make noise through his gag and someone was banging on the bedroom door. "Boss, we're under attack, boss!" The doorknob shook, but that was it. A few minutes later, my phone rang. "Hello? Hi, John. Everyone is locked up. You can come out now. Andy and Jake are right outside the bedroom door. We're going to the ground floor, right?" "Yes, I'm coming out. Be careful." I stood up and slowly walked to the door with Susie beside me. John was groaning louder now, and Susie kicked him in the face as we passed. Blood started coming from his nose. Wendy was still unconscious. I moved the dresser just enough to open the door and peek outside. Andy looked back at me and smiled. His bandaged arm had a little blood, but he seemed okay. We stepped out and I asked, "Where's Kevin?" "He's in the van outside. He's a bit shy around strangers and doesn't want to be seen." 2 of his teammates, wearing standard tactical gear, went into the bedroom and ignored the O'Donnells while starting to take things apart. "Keep an eye on those 2, but don't do anything yet. I need to talk to Kevin." I followed the painting to the van. Kevin had brought a big enough vehicle to carry it. Susie stayed close by as I spoke to him through the open window. It was dark outside now. "What happened?" I asked. "Our guys are okay. 2 got shot in the leg, but they'll be fine. I think you should take Mrs. Butler and the painting back with you." "I insist." "Okay." He paused for a moment. "And John O'Donnell? I think we can manage him." "All right. What about the others?" "They're just hired help. Maybe one of your guys can tell them their boss has left. They should take care of their injuries and find other jobs unless they want to be linked to a big crime." "Your decision. Just make sure we're gone before they have the chance to leave." Soon, I saw 2 of Kevin's men carefully placing Wendy in the back of the van with the painting she was on. She was gagged, but still handcuffed. A smart move, I thought. Maybe George could help her if he wanted. I knew John O'Donnell would never hurt her again. Billy and Jake carried John out, who was hurt and moaning. The guard who had mistreated Susie started to say something until I hit him on the head with my gun. I was definitely keeping it. The rest of O'Donnell's guards stayed quiet. Andy, Susie, and I left together in one car. A cousin of Jenny's I didn't know well sat in the front while I held Susie in the back seat all the way home. Billy, Jake, and a couple of other cousins drove off in their SUV with John tied up in the back. He was going to vanish and never be heard from again. Maybe the rumor would spread that he had gone off with his son Sam to enjoy a nice life on the beach. They could be escaping from some very dangerous people they had upset. Dangerous people like a mother who loved her kids and wouldn't let anyone harm them, especially wealthy and powerful bullies, along with her timid husband. A year later, Frenchie was fully healed, though not entirely emotionally. He still partied a lot and often had women around when he wanted, but it didn't happen very much. No one stayed in his life after Gigi. He never divorced her, but interestingly, she never divorced him either. She made headlines for a while, becoming a star with one of those popular actors, almost famous, as Jenny explained. She was set to appear in his new movie that was being filmed in New Orleans. She also did some modeling for magazines and even made a music video that got people talking. Some said she was like a new rising star, similar to Taylor Swift. But soon after, the buzz around her disappeared. Her brief moment of fame ended before she could finish her first movie. Karen Rigby, once the top middle-distance runner in our group, had also recovered but was no longer the fastest. The newest addition to our team was a small, skinny, red-headed kid of Irish descent. He had run cross-country in high school before joining the Marines, where he became a skilled LRP sniper. He was tough and quick. I brought him into our unit right after he graduated from the police academy, which he found quite easy. I just wished Andy could teach him how to really shoot. Karen never married her fiancé, and they split up on good terms as far as I knew. I heard that Karen and Frenchie were friends for a while, but they managed that privately, and it never caused any problems. Now, Karen and one of her dates sometimes came to our family parties, where she and Frenchie would dance and laugh together for a bit. There were other members of the O'Donnell family, but John was definitely the main one, and everything started to fall apart after John and Sam mysteriously disappeared. I'm sure George Butler tried to help Wendy with her drug issues and get her the best therapist money could buy, but after that he lost interest, and she seemed to vanish from everyone's view. She did get divorced from her second husband, John, who left her. However, the strict divorce agreement meant she didn't receive much money from him. Maybe going away was the best choice for her. George Butler got back all his paintings and said it was a private business deal, refusing to name who he was dealing with. Word spread that some justice had been achieved, and efforts were focused nationwide on finding the two Houston SWAT officers and their female accomplice. They were among the FBI's 10 most wanted. The two criminals we captured were convicted and ended up on Alabama's death row. Their lawyers tried to make a deal, but the criminals had no valuable information to share. Too bad for them. Susan bought a large farmhouse with about 20 acres of land just a mile down the road from Jenny's place. I kept my apartment in Mobile because it helped when work got busy, but I mostly stayed at Susan's, where our kids were every night, almost always right after work. This also gave us a bit of privacy. We didn't have to worry about being seen as living together without being married. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.